Hello. Here we are, back to our roots for Summoning Insight. It's an exciting time to be here. We do have a lot of stuff to talk about. This is going to be a summer split mega preview episode. Thorin is, of course, joining me as usual. Have any words for us today, Thorin?
You mean that we're doing LCS and LEC?
Yeah, and maybe some China and maybe some LCK. We got Atlus here as well, so we'll be bouncing around every 30 minutes. New guest starting in 15 minutes. But we have to talk about some stuff that's going on here first. So you may be wondering, why is this not on the Cloud9 channel? Well, we can't tell you yet, but this is going to be part of a larger initiative, not just for Summoning Insight, but for a variety of other content as well that will be going on this channel, the Insight on Esports channel. This channel will at some point be renamed in the coming months. I think it's going to be a lot better for you guys. You guys are going to see a lot more content here on Twitch and on YouTube on these channels. So if you are turning in, be sure to follow Insight on Esports on Twitch and subscribe on YouTube, because that's where this content is going to be going. The Nines, as we know it, is turning into a new channel that's going to feature Cloud9 players. I will still be hosting that one, of course, so no worries there. But Thorin and I, we've got some big plans, some very exciting plans, and that will be coming in the future. So be sure to look for that. In the meantime, we're taking it back to our roots here. No more sponsors, just us in the old overlay that I didn't even bother to update, because who knows how long we'll be using this. And yes, it will still be on the same Spotify also. You don't have to change anything about the podcast. Podcast location is going to be exactly the same. So how are you doing, Thorin? Are you excited about our new content direction?
I mean, nothing's agreed from me yet, mate. So all just talk at the moment, isn't it?
It's true.
You know, I don't get excited by just talk. I need actual tangible action to be taken. No, I mean, one thing I do want to actually bring up before we start is, just because I don't think the guests will be that interested in it. I thought a very interesting tidbit of news that a lot of people seem to have missed was where yesterday Ovilee announced that she would not be basically appearing on the LCS broadcast anymore. She won't be doing those interviews. I think it was even intimated that she will only do stuff off the broadcast now. Like, she might do some stuff with the content team, but not like in any way on the official LCS broadcast. And I would just say this, bearing in mind, as far as I can tell, that isn't someone voluntarily stepping down. I think she was very careful to even phrase it to make sure that that was not the implication. I just think this is another example of what I noticed many years ago, which is that anyone who's actually good at their job and organically creates interest in the league from their personality is not welcome on the LCS broadcast. It is a provable fact at this point in time. The only person I can think of who even vaguely does that and still is involved would probably be Mark Z. That's about it. Everyone else who does it has been driven away and is at best exiled to the world of core streaming. That's it.
I mean, being exiled to the world of co-streaming is potentially more lucrative at this point in time.
Not if they shut down co-streaming in a year or two.
That's true. Not if they do that. We don't know.
Get ready for that, guys, when that happens, and they fuck everyone. Because if you know Riot does the same thing every time. Monty's in the process of being tricked by him again. He thinks they're going to let him run Valorant tournaments and all sorts of things. They're not. What they're going to do is they're going to let you do that for the short amount of time that you doing 99% of the legwork helps them, and you get 1% of the benefit. And then the second that it doesn't, they'll just revoke all of those from you, and what will you have? Nothing. So the same thing will happen again, I guarantee you, with the core streaming. For now, they'll let it happen, probably to build up the visibility and the profile of core streaming and get all the big people they want on board. Like, I'm sure they'll want Tyler One, who's still core streaming, etc. But in a few years from now, the people I think are cool and no one's want the game, I guarantee they'll be prohibited from doing it, and they'll literally use their IP rights to flex on that as well.
I mean, it's certainly possible in the future, and, you know, I am well aware of Riot's tactics in the past. I think, like, when it comes to the Ovilee issue, that it is super interesting, like you say, that this person who was creating a bunch of fun, original content around LCS and around League of Legends is not going to be affiliated with the broadcast anymore. Like you said, doesn't seem like this was a voluntary split. If anything, I think Ovilee was heavily underutilized by the LCS in terms of the kind of content and the I think honestly very fun quirks that she had. Seemed like the audience really liked her. I don't really understand the reasoning behind.
I don't know what the downside is, basically. She's not even a controversial person in any context. You only benefit from having her involved with your show, basically. But far be it from me to tell Riot what to do.
I do think it's incredibly strange. And I do think that this, to me, how this reads is that I think what happened is, without having any inside information, what it looks like to me is that they used this sort of coronavirus pandemic to sort of eliminate her job, because a lot of what she was doing was valuable in an in-person sense, or being able to create hype videos or hype content or silly content in person. And so when you just have her interviewing remotely, it doesn't necessarily have the same weight or impact. So it looks like it's possible that that was a reason why she was sort of taken out of the LCS, as far as it looks from the outside. But
by the way, just as an aside, I'm just going to point this out because someone has to in this industry. When people have for years obnoxiously bragged to our faces that they essentially can just piss away money on the esports side of League of Legends, and who gives a fuck because we own the game as well. Years later, when your financial masters come in and tell you, actually, you can't do any of that stuff, I want you to literally penny pinch every cent that we give you in League of Legends. It then seems a bit obnoxious, your past behavior, where you were just frivolously wasting money on stupid shit, when later you could have spent it, and got actual, efficient use out of that money and done awesome things. It just feels a bit fucked up, doesn't it, if you think of the past history in that sense?
I think that the process of building up esports for developers has changed from a marketing only business model into the attempt to actually make a sustainable business. So as the business goals changed, I think that's what's going on, which, to be fair, I think when LCS started, if they had tried to make it a sustainable business, they would have completely failed, right? Like, they had to overspend at the time.
I mean, I know for an actual fact that they essentially turned away sponsorship offers.
They did.
So how making less money would be a better business move? I don't know, Monty. I'll never understand that personally.
That was the famous, we don't want to be NASCAR quote that
they
happened
used to
back in the day.
They used to even use the ultra giga brain level stupidity of I wouldn't want this sponsor because they're too small. It's like, but no one else wants to sponsor it. Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that I was someone who could only be sponsored by that, but that is who you can only be sponsored by. Yeah, I know, but I don't want other people to think that. I want to trick them that one day, as soon as you get involved in conversations like that with people, I'm saying, I'm out. You know what? I'll just go work with people who actually know what they're doing. What sort of cargo cult level thinking is this? But if we pretend we're the NFL, then maybe people will think we are. So it doesn't work that way. That's not what the NFL's the NFL. Is it
I think it's also just no one expects you to be the NFL. So really, the only people expecting you to be the NFL are the people inside your company and not your fan base at all.
Basically,
it's so weird. It's so weird. I mean, this cuts also back to I don't know if you saw this morning, the LEC's latest hype video that was really fun, and LCS released this animation, and it just shows in a nutshell the difference between the strategies that these leagues have. LCS is going to spend a lot of money on something that's just kind of ho-hum okay, and you're why did you spend that much money making something like that with, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but it also just doesn't, every time they do that, it changes dramatically. They have no sort of overall idea what the tone of their league is, what the kind of content is. Meanwhile, LEC just keeps nailing the tone. They've released a bazillion pieces of preseason hype content already, all based around the same theme. And you know what you're getting with LEC. With LCS, it's every split, I have no idea what kind of content they're going to make, and it makes for a super uneven experience overall. I don't understand what they're doing.
I also just think, I mean, this ties into the same conversation that the people who have the initiative and creative power to make these things are not welcome at the LCS broadcast. They are not allowed to work there. Or if they do, they will be quickly rooted out, named, shamed, and then banned from ever being involved. Because, like, to me, it's so stupid that actually the irony is this, Monty, they're not even on the level the NFL's on. Do you think the NFL, when Peyton Manning and Tom Brady were playing in it, used to never make a big deal that those two were playing? They used to make a regular season game seem like the Super Bowl, mate. They used to even call it like the fucking Manning-Brady Bowl or whatever, like, and do massive commercials about it, referencing all their past. Like, these idiots are double-lifting Bjergsen, win championships together, go to separate teams, and never make any content about it. Never make, like, an intro for the season, like Bjergsen walking in, like, past all the TSM fucking, you know, those banners on the wall that they put of like the championships, and then he'd see like Team Liquid's one, and then Doublelift to be stood there like, yeah. And then he'd be like, do some, and then they'd have some. No, we can never get any of that, of course. Never can just get like a cool intro, which again, anyone who's watched Korean esports for the last 20 years would know is the shit, and everyone wants to see them. You almost can't fail. Like, you'd have to really mess the execution up to make people not like it, wouldn't you?
Well, we also even talked about in the Papa Smithy episode how they like don't highlight Someday, who is, you know, a legendary player. It's like they're not even capable of really telling the stories about the teams that they have.
Didn't even bother to hype a fucking world champion from only like a year earlier coming to the LCS when Piglet came over.
Oh, and Piglet
as well. Either of them would work, mate. Any of them.
The fact that it's happened multiple times is hilarious.
Yeah. You think about it, right? In this scenario, that's like literally Tom Brady leaves the Patriots and goes to the CFL, and you telling me they wouldn't hype the fact that the fucking like greatest NFL quarterback ever came with all the MVP? That'd be all they'd hype. That would be all. You'd never shut the fuck up about it, would you?
I know it's not the same. Like, it's not the same. You know, to have a sort of washed up player come into your league, but it is like. I don't know if you remember, but when David Beckham came to America to play for the LA Galaxy, holy shit, dude. Nobody watches MLS, let's be clear.
No, half the people hyping it didn't even care about football, but they knew David Beckham exactly. That's the point.
But the point is like that was such a huge story that was the ever-loving shit was just hyped out of it for MLS. And even everyone in this who enjoyed sports, whether you liked soccer or not, had heard that David Beckham had come over, right? So these are the kind of things that you would expect normally to happen here, but for some reason...
This isn't even some deep cut level we're talking about. It's the most obvious thing to do, and they haven't even figured that out to this day. But the reason why, by the way, to loop it all back again, is because of what I said at the beginning. Like, put it this way, who is the mastermind of LCS? Nobody knows. If it is a person, nobody knows them. And what are the odds that this magical person exists, but none of us in the industry know them? It doesn't. There's no one. It is nobody. It's a producer talking to a guy from there, talking to a guy from Riot, and they just make what they do, which is a basic show. Which doesn't. It looks pretty slick, and it looks clean, and it's fairly well produced, and they put money into the like logistical aspects of production. But they don't have any flair for the creative element, which is so whack to me because, like, esports especially plays heavily into that. Think of the overlap in our community. This is what the Koreans figured out years ago, and fucking anime and all sorts of nerd stuff and sci-fi stuff. They don't flex into any of that. They don't get it. They don't even seem to get their own game. Even their own game flexes into that stuff.
And Ovilee was all about that anime stuff. And look, here's the thing. It's not even my cup of tea. Like, I find some of it like weird and confusing. But you know what? People like it. So, you know, who am I to say what should or should not be if people seem to be enjoying it, right? I mean, I make jokes about it, but I don't like objectively hate it or think that it has no place within the ecosystem, right? Oh man, I mean, it is just wild that, you know, this stuff is still going on over there. I mean, we talked about it on the show Essential Esports when we sat down with Quickshot and talked about all the creative things that the LEC was doing and how they are trying to affect their content. And Dirk, the producer over there, is really helping out with the creative vision, how all the casters are contributing and everything like that. I mean, we keep going over it, but it just seems very weird. And I mean, you couple the fact that you can't get rid of Jat. I mean, they didn't get rid of Jat, but you lose Jat, who was, in my opinion, Jat was probably doing the best casting of his entire life this year in terms of quality. And so you lose Jat, and then you also lose Ovilee in the same offseason. It's just like they're just bleeding all these casters and bleeding the very people who give the LCS so much personality.
Yeah, there's the other thing. If you lose Jat, like in traditional sports, you've got to replace that profile with someone who's hopefully either an equally big profile or you'd go with a different angle. Like, I don't know who you'd get in our kit. Like, I mean, I actually do. The obvious one to me would be you would make like an enormous offer to someone like an LS. You try and bring them in, you know, like a big name player where the idea is it'd be a game changer if they came to LCS. You'd make a move like that. They don't seem to care, as far as I can tell, which unfortunately itself builds into how they run their broadcast. Because if you know some of the things about how the analysts have been treated over the years and how much they used to pay them at the beginning, like they really do treat all those pieces like they're all plug and play. Whereas, like from my perspective, go and look at any great broadcast anywhere in the world. There are certain people that are almost irreplaceable. That's why you build the show around them.
But I think that they haven't done that because then they become, you know, reliant on those people more or less. And if there's one thing,
you normally need to be reliant on people to succeed.
Here's
what being in a team is.
But I think you just nailed it. Like the difference between LCS and LEC is that LEC has built a broadcast in which they are reliant on their casters in order to provide this content. And LCS has created a broadcast where they are reliant on no one, but as a result, it has very little flair, it has very little flavor, and it just kind of feels sterile and boring. And you can see that in the hype video. They spend a bunch of money on an animation, which is cute, which does have a lot of references to many things throughout League of Legends history, and in and of itself is fine. But you compare that to the LEC content that is entirely built around the players and the casters and the people there. And I think that's like a huge, huge difference. I mean, you don't really, they animated, I guess, like Freak and Captain Flowers in at the end, which, by the way, I just thought, just as a as a piece of content.
Yeah, not double lifting Bjergsen has to be fucking.
Well, I mean, sure, around the guy on the couch, the generic fan. But what I thought was so funny about that is that the last shot of that animation is like Captain Flowers and Freak sitting up, like showing up next to the fan, right? They just pop up on the couch as if they're, you know, all watching it together as friends, which is. This is how tone deaf they are. That is exactly the opposite experience of watching the LCS. I don't feel like I'm hanging out watching the games with my friends. That's what I feel like when I watch LCK. That is what I made over there. That's what Doa and I intended to be made. And that theme, that feeling has crept through all of the casters, Papa Smithy, now LS, Valdez, Atlus, everybody has maintained that tone. LCS is intended to put you at arm's length and have a more, quote, professional, distant production, right? And so
they've done that successful thing where in attempting to appeal to everyone, they appeal to no one.
Yes, but
you can't appeal to everyone at the same time. We're all mutually exclusive in that regard. Like, even if there's overlap between some of us, we can't all like everything, can we? So you have to make it pretty bland to just appeal to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny that the symbolism they put in at the end was like exactly the opposite of what they actually do when it comes to the creative tone of the LCS. So I was like, this is so weird. It also just shows that they're incredibly out of touch with their own creative process. But that's enough complaining about that, at least. We have a lot of guests today, guys. As you know, we do have to get Kelsey Moser on first. We are going to be going through Kelsey, then Atlus from LCK. Then we're going to go to Macc, who's the coach for MAD Lions. Then we're going to Curry, who's the coach for FlyQuest. Then Macc, the coach for MAD Lions. And then we're going to have Jankos from G2 on at the very end of the show. So this is already going to go on for several hours, and we got to cycle through these people about every 30 minutes to talk about upcoming split predictions and everything like that. So we're going to take a quick break while we go ahead and try and get Kelsey onto the call. So we'll see you in just a couple. Okay, our first guest on the show today from 100 Thieves, the coach of the Academy team, longtime LPL enthusiast, coach of many teams now throughout League of Legends history, is Kelsey Moser. Welcome.
Hello. Nice to be back on Summoning Insight on Summoning Insight's channel.
That's right. Here forevermore, hopefully. So let's talk. I think we should probably talk a little bit about China first before we go into some NA stuff. How much of the mid-season cup did you end up seeing?
I watched most of it, yeah. I think it was, for everyone who was saying that TES was going to be the better team. I think it was just more immediate than expected.
I thought so. Here's the weird thing.
Mhm.
I thought Top Esports should have won the LPL final. I think that they mega through, and it's one of those weird instances where I feel like the better team lost the final.
So yes and no. I think because we talked about this a little bit with Ashley on Narratively too, but it was effectively I came in also predicting TES. I think most people I talked to, except for maybe Emily, predicted TES, and it was mostly just because like hands difference between mid and bot, right? But I think the big thing that ended up being a factor was one, like the jungle meta, I think is going slowly towards, or at the time was already going slowly towards more carry jungle, like more XP in the jungle, out farming Graves, Nidalee, like these types of things that we saw more in MSC after the patch change. And that suits JDG way more. And then I think the big thing, especially in game 5, that ended up kind of being the difference maker was the counterpick support. I think support's probably the weakest role on TES still.
Obviously, arguably, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that ended up being a pretty big factor. I think support counterpick was really huge in basically every single final across the world. So at least the 4 major regions, because I don't really watch anything else right now.
Thing is, though, when she says
I only watch the 4 major regions. I'm sorry. Are you sure you're watching enough there? Anyway.
The thing is, when she says that, like that, it's more immediate than they thought. That's basically my thinking as well. Like I've liked watching Knight and 369 when they had the team last year, but that team had very obvious flaws. And it's like when they lost in the playoffs and didn't win the LPL last year, it made sense. Like it's just because you like the play, you can't hate on the result. Like it made absolute sense that they didn't go to Worlds. Like they had enough flaws that were exposed even domestically that they didn't. So the problem is when they lost this final, even though Kelsey's given some very good meta-related reasons that they lost, when they did still have a very good chance of winning it, even in those games, it just gives the sense that like, right, is this one of those teams that has to like repeatedly bump into the ceiling over and over again? Then eventually you break through in say a year from now or something. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like the idea that they already beat all the Asian teams and they're the best now, like I don't even fully believe that. Like I think that was just because it was an online cop. And listen, I've known people tried, but it isn't the same as when you're on a world stage. It's like all the pressures there and stuff. So like, I think that to me, I'll put it this way, in Counter-Strike, because we have to do online competition in that game as well, like we have no lands, I've spun it like this. Basically, yeah, it's not good to have online competition. It's not as good as offline. And obviously, when offline's available, we'll all forget online. But the one upside of online play is because it does take away so many of the intangible factors that make people perform worse. You just sort of get to see what people's potential is like. So I think for me, what this tournament showed was what the potential of top esports is, which is to potentially be the best team in the world. Now, would they actually do that in a real like world setting online? I don't know about that yet. I'll have to wait and see. So I think it's just interesting if you use that lens, that way you don't have to think it's legit or not legit. It's legit in the context of what's happening now.
Yeah, I think I definitely buy that. So I didn't have a lot of faith in the LCK teams except for T1 going in. So just because I thought that there was like a lot of really clear awkwardness and really clear weaknesses in every single one of them. And I thought IG was going to be fucking bad. So pretty much everything else was fairly accurate. Actually, I think FPX performed better than I thought they would, because FPX, like the thing that people saw of the FPX at Worlds doesn't show the kind of ugly side of a Doinby team, which is that if they start losing, it's almost this kind of reactionary Doinby plays hyper scaling champs, and then they end up like setting up their macro in mid game so that they give them 2 lanes of farm, and the ADC is really, really starved. So that's kind of the FPX we sort of saw, and he's done this on almost every team he's been on, like QG in the past. Also, when he was on Rogue Warrior, things like this.
He's also on Jingdong.
Yeah. So if you look at these things that he's done in the past, it's like kind of typical when they're not doing well, right? So I thought we could either see that team, which is the team that we saw in the semifinals of LPL and towards the end of LPL in general, or we could see the version that we saw in the 3rd place match where they just said, okay, fuck it, I'm playing Galio again. You know, which is what ended up happening at MSC, and they looked a lot more stylistically like the Worlds team.
Well, isn't that going back into? I mean, we can talk about the upcoming metagame as well, because there are going to be a lot of shifts right now. I did an interview with Reapered where he was talking about how he thinks that basically every champion is viable, and one of the play styles that's going to see increased viability coming into this split with the jungle XP changes is going to be, as you said, farming carry junglers, whether that's going to be Nidalee, Graves, Olaf, AP Shyvana. These are all going to be options. And in those kind of scenarios, here's the other thing you can do. You can play more Galio mid. You can play Karma mid. You can play supportive mids that are going to really enable a lot of pressure on the map because of their ability to move into other lanes and for their ability to peel off of jungle carries. So this is not going to be the only way to play, guys. You can still play the other way that we saw last split. You can still play with the aggressive junglers. You can still play with carry mids. But it is going to, I think, dimensionalize a lot of play and really help out teams like Fun Plus Phoenix, because I think it opens their play style back up in a way that was a little bit more challenging last split.
It's it's definitely way more like historically. I remember he played like Maokai to Swift playing Nidalee, right? Stuff like this is stuff that was really successful for them. Lulu with all sorts of like fast, like Lulu Hecarim, like stuff like this has always been, I think, his bread and butter. He's way more like a secondary support. This is way more how Doinby likes to play. So I think that this meta is going to be a lot better for FPX if Tian is performing well. Sometimes lately I felt like Tian has been not as good, but I think that if he gets back into form and he seems stronger, I also think like Lee Sin is kind of a better meta for him, like these more where he's involved in lanes early rather than outbraining the other jungle, by out farming them is kind of less Tian style as well. But I guess we'll see how it pans out.
Right, I've got to do one of my patented rants. So here we go. Here's the patented rant, okay? The rant goes like this. You know, I'm famous for being one of the only people in all of League of Legends that will admit I'm not an expert about League of Legends. I don't know a lot about like the deep intricacies of certain tactical moves in the game. I don't even always understand the resets people do in lane. Sometimes it's a mystery to me why they do them. But I don't have the time nor the inclination to make that something I'm going to dedicate my life to. So it'll just have to always be a mystery that I get people like Kelsey to explain to me. But I'll tell you what, the more I watch the game, the more I realize everyone else in the whole game's pretending to have a sick eye test that understands the game. Almost none of you do. And here's how I know. If any of you had that sick eye test, you wouldn't have all memed on FPX when they were in that fucking shit group at Worlds where they had J-Team and Splice, absolute garbage teams. You would have been calling them as the champions then. Because the second that they won Worlds, everyone in the West told me it was obvious they were the best team. They clearly were superior in all ways. I even saw fucking Captain Flowers on stream call Doinby the fucking mid. He said that he carried like something like he was the best mid in the world and he carried FPX to the championship. It's like, okay, whoever wrote that for you, the writer needs to be fired. But okay. So like in this kind of a world, right? Everyone wants to tell everyone. Like, that's why everyone gets so mad if you say that G2 was actually the best team of last year. They're like, well, they're not. They didn't win Worlds. The one that mattered. It's like, should I just go ahead and pop that little bubble you all living in League of Legends? IG wasn't the best team at Season 8 Worlds. RNG was. Every team that has won Worlds for about the last 4 seasons won because they tripped over into a fucking meta that perfectly suited their team almost. Like, it's ridiculous at this point in time. It's not that these teams don't go, like, it's like everyone's stuck in some fucked up, like, nature versus nurture scenario. And they all think, right, that the teams all come in uniform with a top laner that's identical, a bottom laner that's identical, and then they all come to Worlds and they go, this brand new game's been invented. We're all going to figure out how to play. No one does that. All the time. This is why I actually respect Chinese teams more than any other region, because they actually understand you can't control the way Riot balances the game. So why not just play around the strengths of your team? So you know what? If your team is a hard carry AD carry who has to farm up through lane, it doesn't matter if it goes to solo lane play. Just play that way and hope you can win anyway. Because when it does go into that meta, you will be the best team. It's actually the smartest approach I've seen to League of Legends. Meanwhile, everyone else in the public conceit of League of Legends is stuck in some nightmare hellscape where you all pretend a global meta exists and that you can take fucking Orome and make him the best carry top laner in the world and win worlds doing that because Fiora's available. Like, this is the most brain-dead way of thinking about the game imaginable, and also doesn't yield to interesting talk shows, which is why I made my little rant. So
I think it's an illusion of control, right? It's that we tell ourselves that we can play any way we want,
yes,
so that we have an illusion of control. We don't feel like we're just
sure.
It,
I mean, this goes back. I mean, this goes back the entire time. Like, even the players don't understand it. That's why the whole meme from like the Dunzo manifesto, where Link said that I told them just to play Sivir comps, is so funny, because that is what they were capable of playing. It's not like it was some earth-shattering news, but you just have to.
He makes it sound like you think that was the ultimate secret to League of Legends. That's how he made it sound. Yeah. Whereas the irony of it is, Monty, when I read that, I took that as the famous case, which everyone must now know was imp from fucking Samsung White, of a coach telling his AD carry he had to play Kog'Maw all the time because he was too aggressive otherwise.
Yeah.
It's not because he thought Kog'Maw was the best. It's because on Kog'Maw you can't just try to jump into the enemy all the time. So what he was doing was telling you the fact that you have to play this is because you can't do the other shit. That's how I read that when I heard it.
I mean, this goes back. Look, I really dislike Doinby as a player. Doinby is probably one of my least favorite players of all time. I never liked him like when he started out in the LPL in China. I still don't like his play style, even though obviously I enjoy, the map pressure and rotations, because I feel like, and people shit on me at the end of last year when I was criticizing him. And I do agree that they fell into a meta that was highly advantageous to them. But I will say to their credit that at least they use mid at the way it should be used, which is in terms of agency on the map. Just because it is always... Here's the other thing about League of Legends. You will always be capped as a team in terms of your success without a good mid laner, because that player simply has the most availability to make plays and carry the game, period. Because you're in the damn center of the map and you can go into the side lanes. So this is why I never understand teams that try and build around sort of like passive or more supportive mid laners, because if you don't have agency from that position in 2020, you're fucked. Like there's
you hate NA as a region. Okay.
Yeah. Well, obviously. Don't we all? But I mean, I'm just saying there is a ceiling that is achievable with a certain amount of mid lane skill, right? And in order to actually be a competitor, you have to have a certain amount of mid lane ability.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the way that we figured out how to play the game starting, not even last year, probably before that. It's just become very obvious that this is the way that everyone needs to start playing. I think for a while, like, I think Corki Azir meta was definitely a thing. I think Corki Azir is still a thing, but I think you can change the way that you're playing Corki and Azir, right? You don't have to play Corki and Azir. Like, the thing that's making Corki really strong right now is obviously not the pressure that he can generate in lane, because the pressure he generates in lane is god-awful. It's the fact that when Herald spawns at 8 minutes is when the Corki's package spawns, right? And then you can use that pressure to basically go out on the map, control the objectives as they show up. No one wants to contest because everyone here sees that Corki has packages. They're like, oh, I guess we're just giving this one, guys, these types of things. So it's just like the agency that these champions have on the map. You have to think about them in a different way, right? So.
Well, here's the next thing we need to talk about then, Kelsey, because I'll set you up for an opinion I know that you have, basically, which is anyone who only watched the end of the LPL playoffs will also be like, wow, look at Yagao. He's a fucking banger too. Like, he's right up there with Knight. And it's like, basically, that is not what Kelsey's opinion is. So in line with what Monty just said about having a sick mid laner, right? To you, as far as I know, your opinion of Yagao is he has certain champions he's really good on, but that's fairly limited. Well, in that scenario, Jingdong are the champions of the LPL. Can Jingdong be world champions with Yagao as a mid laner?
So this is probably the number one reason why I didn't think Jingdong could win, is just because I think Yagao is kind of the guy who picks a champion that he really likes one split and just spams it. He's like the guy where you're scouting teams in by their solo queue accounts, and you pick up and it's like, oh, this guy's played 50 Zoe games, yeah, 50 Rumble games, whatever. And then it's like, oh, all right, I guess we're banning that champ. It's fine. Moving on. This is like, for him, this split, it's LeBlanc, which is a bit different because he's mostly done control mages. So TS ended up beating his LeBlanc in MSC. And I think part of the reason why they weren't successful against his LeBlanc in the final is because they were playing with and around Lysandre really, really poorly. And Lysandre is like the known LeBlanc counter. So if you're thinking about the agency of mid lane, the way that we were talking about it, like they were just not playing well around it as a team. So you would have Lysandre camping in like Pixel Bush for a sick flank, and then his team wouldn't be behind him. He would just like go in for the flank and then die and collapsed or did anything. I also think some of the flanks he was looking for were bad, but it felt like, okay, we can beat the LeBlanc with this strategy. And maybe they practiced it a couple of games in scrims and thought it was good, but then they got on stage and jitters or whatever prevented them from executing it well. So I think that was like one of the big kind of pitfalls of where TS looked the worst were the Lysandre games. But yeah, I think Yagao I feel a bit sad for him, just to answer that question, because he's from the same hometown as Knight, right? He started playing for two of the different like big mega online retailers as they entered the LPL at the same time. So they had the same start from the same town, and he's just like not
just in his shadow permanently.
Really, yeah. He'll for his entire career he'll just be compared to this guy, and it's just so bad actually.
All right, what about this then? So obviously, let's just do the other Chinese team that was there. So it's obviously IG, right? I mean, we talked about FPX briefly already. So with IG, here's the question. If people don't know, they actually, after this tournament, basically announced that Leon is going. Like, I think he's already been transferred. I think, what team did he go to? V5 or something? Who was it he went to? Do you remember? Am I wrong with that?
I don't.
It was some not that big team, though, from what I remember.
I don't think he went to Vici. Yeah, that's
Vici,
right.
There we go, right? It's Vici.
Which they needed a new jungler, holy shit. But
but anyway, so the point is, essentially, that means that IG is just committing to Ning for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah, more or less. There wasn't any, because obviously LPL has sort of a transfer window where they can't get players who are from other teams outside of that transfer window. They can theoretically sign like a free agent or whatever. But
okay.
And they have some jugglers in their LDL team that they can maybe try, because that's where Leon came from as well. But yeah, more or less, right? Kind of thing, yeah.
So here's the thing again. If someone, remember, imagine that the viewer only knows IG from international competition, then they're going to think, oh, Ning, wasn't he that sick player from Season 8 Worlds final? This is why people don't know that when like Loco was bragging to me, like, I picked IG to win because I said that Baolan and Ning would both be smurfing when they got out of groups. I was like, in that case, mate, you tripped over and got lucky. I don't know why the fuck you're talking shit. Like, because if you've ever seen Ning's career, like, this guy has the most ridiculous laws I've ever seen of a player as good as him. Like, give us some thoughts on this. There's a reason why they kept pushing him out the lineup, but you have to keep coming back in. So what do you think of like the idea of a Ning-fueled IG again?
So I'm one of the biggest Ning defenders in the history of the time, and that's just because I think the way that IG plays is so illogical if you're a jungler, right? Imagine like everyone on the map is just pushed really, really hard. It's like they're in lane, right? They just shove relentlessly.
It's like Nightmare Fuel, yeah. There's 3 lanes all pushing, and they can all be ganked, and you can only be in 1 lane at a time.
Every single one of them is calling a play, and he has to basically optimize and pick the correct one, right? This is one of my favorite, like TBQ. This was years and years ago after he was I guess effectively fired from LGD at the end of 2015, right? He always said, no, I chose to leave because I knew if they got Marin, all the lanes would be calling for me to do something, and it would be a nightmare.
Here's a point.
He chose to leave, but that was beside the point. But I think that's exactly like how IG plays, and it just so happens that they're able to get more of an advantage on the side where, like, usually it was bot lane who was just thrown to the wolves, and they're the ones inting, right? But now I think it just feels like even when they play around the Shy, he's just having the worst fucking split of his life, right? This guy is actually just inting. So if they don't play around him, he's bleeding way, way harder than he should, and dragons are really important. So I think
just to say,
yeah,
like, because give us some thoughts on that actually, because again, it's one thing to int, right, or to play badly. The Shy is doing it in an unconscionable way. Like, he doesn't genuinely see the way he's thinking these games, guys. He thinks he's going to carry these games. He really thinks he can turn these fucking games around like he did.
It's just really funny because I remember his criticism of Nuguri, right? Which was like, oh, this guy just plays like he doesn't know where the juggler is and all this shit. And it's just like, I thought it was really ironic that this was something he was pointing out at the time. I agreed with him that it was a criticism of nudity, but I was also like, Jesus Christ, like, if you're trying to use that as an excuse for why people shouldn't compare the two of you, then you're really picking the wrong issue here. So yeah, it was very it's just really funny because he's basically becoming like a caricature of himself. It's almost like he's trying to prove that the playstyle he thinks is bad is actually bad or something along those lines. But they're not playing around top as much, right? Because one thing I think they've kind of tricked themselves into thinking Puff is really good because everyone says Puff is really good and he got first team ADC, but he's just fine. And then the other thing is I think the Dragon.
Kelsey, it was these people, you probably never heard of them. They were called Bang and Wolf, and they were the most fucking average 83 support duo of all time. But because Faker just fucking took them by their little baby hands and walked them to a bunch of world championships, apparently they're just the gods of that lane now, and I was wrong the whole time. Me, yeah, I guess, right? You know, when they separated and went to NA and elsewhere, they were garbage then, but one of those mysteries of life, you know how these things go.
I think like the team feels like they should play around bot because of Dragon, and they don't want to give up Dragon. So like theoretically, like giving up the first 2 dragons is good, right? Because who cares? And you can stack the soul and everything else.
Yes.
But then when you're in game and you give up 2 dragons, it feels bad, you know? It's just
well, it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about the way that the Dragon is played right now is that you can opt into that, but you are making a pact at that point in time that you are going to start fighting those dragons when it hits number 3. So I think it's a fascinating sort of trade aspect of the game that has developed so far in 2020. So I'm all for it, but I think as a player, oftentimes it's different. You get sucked into it. Like the dragon gravity the dragon gravity well becomes enormous, and you're just like, shit, should I really give up number 2 right there? Even though we all know that, even though
we have to fight this.
I'll give you the reason why this happens, by the way, because I see it in my own game, Counter-Strike, all the time. Basically, when someone is in what's called, anyone who's played Valorant will know what I'm talking about now, a clutch round scenario where you're the last person alive, and let's say there's 1 or 2 opponents left, right? That is just such a different way of playing the game because all your actions become magnified and what you do wins or loses you the round, right? Whereas in a normal 5v5 game, everyone has agency. So even if you fuck something up, it's not the same. You know, like this guy over here can do it right. So it's a lot easier in the normal game to play the way that you think the game should be played. But when you're under that pressure of like magnifying glass of the clutch round, there are some really intelligent people will do really stupid moves because like they just get trapped into a certain mindset in that scenario. Like they can just get toyed around with on the map. Like they go for something where you're like, why did you go for that? It was obviously he was faking. Oh, but in the moment though, what if he wasn't? Like, and then I'd have lost the game. It's like you start thinking of all these secondary and third like considerations that really shouldn't be what you think about. Because after the game, if you did the wrong move, you're gonna again go back into that analytical mode and go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. It's why I used to think, Monty, it's no wonder you couldn't coach that CLG team, mate. Anyone who's ever seen any reality series where double lift is involved, he can't even let his coach get a fucking word in. He's too busy explaining what he should have done differently in the game. It's like, I want to just step in and go, that doesn't matter, idiot, because the way you're talking and thinking now is never the way you're going to think in the game. So shut the fuck up and let that guy maybe explain it to you in a way where it will sink in. Because you telling us all after the fact that you did it wrong doesn't make the game ever be won.
That's how all pro players are, though.
It's a real problem people have. I'm not saying I'd be an example, by the way. If I play the game, I'll be locked into that same tunnel vision as well. We all are. But it's really hard to overcome, in my opinion.
But I'm sure Kelsey could talk to this. But that's literally every pro player's mentality. They come out of the game, and here's what all of them do. They're like, we fucked up right there. We won't do that again. And then they just walk off afterwards, doing nothing. So I mean that is that's just how they act. And because they can understand in retrospect, they rarely think about how can I change my reaction in the moment. That almost never enters their brain. So how do you deal with that, Kelsey?
That's one where you basically are just talking about you start having conversations about the method of decision making, right? In game, or how you can change that, right? And it becomes like a lot more, sometimes you just have games where I don't want to review that shit, right? Like you guys are really just running it down. So let's have a conversation about how we are like mentally right now. Like those types of situations, I think, have to be a juggle where you kind of are making them think about how they're making decisions rather than just the decision itself. Because I think most of the time in retrospect, you can point out, like, if anyone has talked about macro or anything before as a team, they can usually point out, okay, well, we did that wrong. That was wrong. But what does that mean, right? How do I fix that for next time? Like, that's the next step that you have to start talking about. You can't just like let them walk off and say, we just won't do it, right?
All right.
But it's very weird. Anyway.
We do have to get to our next guest. So, Kelsey, given the current meta, let's have your predictions for LPL this summer, and let's do LCS as well, because you're part of 100 Thieves and you're watching a lot of those games. So who's going to Worlds? Now that we know there are 4 teams from LPL, who's going to Worlds from LPL?
Obviously, Victory 5. Yeah. No, I think if you've been paying attention to the Victory 5 memes that have been going on, I think that they're basically just beating bad teams. But I'm looking at still TES. I think it's pretty obvious. I'm pretty interested in Vici, but I'm not willing to say that they're going to go, just because I think they still have a lot of weaknesses within their roster. But
what about E-Star?
I don't think E-Star is going to go either. But especially with the mid change, I think people are trying to say that this was
they sold the good mid lane to RNG. I forgot about that.
Yeah, because people, like, I mean, Fun is another player that I'll defend because I feel kind of bad for him, but he's also just not that great. But I think, yeah, it's probably just a really boring answer, but I think it's probably going to be, I will say RNG, because I think that this will be good for their jungler. Like, if the meta stays kind of how it is, it'll be good for their jungler. I'll say TES. I'll say FPX, because we already discussed how like this is pretty good for them. And then JDG, because yeah, I think the meta is just like too different. It's too difficult for IG to fix in the short term unless they really make a lot of roster changes. If they do, then it's possible they go.
I mean, I need to see Knight at Worlds. I need to see this. That is the one thing that I want from Worlds this year more than anything, I have to say.
Yeah, I think most people agree right now that he's probably the best player who hasn't been yet, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm in agreement. He should definitely go.
And LCS, quickly, 3 teams?
3 teams? Okay. Oh, this is...
Should we just say Cloud9 and get that one over with?
Cloud9.
We'll just say Cloud9 100T, you know? I have to say it. Or Papa Swithy will fire me. Here we go. Let's say Cloud9, 100 Thieves, and honestly, don't think it's going to be TSM or TL.
FlyQuest? EG?
Maybe EG. They have some interesting pieces. So I think that they can make something work. So I'll say EG.
All right. Excellent. Got the predictions in. We're going to take a quick break. Come back with Atlus. We got to keep moving on this show, guys. We'll get predictions from everybody. Thank you for joining us, Kelsey. Very briefly, good luck in your scrims today.
Thank you.
All right. Here we are. Now, switching it up. Atlus, caster for the LCK. Welcome. We were going to do a show. You were very sad about LCK's performance. He was being peak sad boy at the time. So
here's the thing: the universe didn't want there to be a summoning insight without Thorin. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It was going to happen. It's going to happen, boys. But wouldn't be the same without me, would it?
It's okay, Atlus. It pains me greatly too to see the current state of the LCK. It truly, this is the darkest timeline where Korea is only better than North America. What the fuck is going on? Why do they still have so many great legendary players who are legitimately individually good? And now, of course, I've had to suffer through whatever is happening this season on KT, which was, I don't know.
Oh God,
my nightmare of with Smeb.
Yeah. Oh my God,
the return of Smeb. So let's talk about Korea's current.
Is this mic loud enough, by the way? It sounds a bit low to me. Is that just me?
I can
turn it up.
Boost it.
I can.
Is it loud enough for you?
Feeling better?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh, okay. There you
All
go.
right.
He can turn it up. He can turn it up himself.
But Monty, was that actually a rhetorical question, or do you want him to tell you the reason why?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the question, actually, to be honest.
So
basically, why is Korea this way? I've got an actual answer for you. No one else has. It's normally a rhetorical question that starts a hypothetical discussion. I've got a very quick answer, which is I have the canary in the coal mine. His name is Cloud Templar. He's a legendary player for the LCK. He's been a broadcaster for many years. And here's the key thing. After every big international tournament, he always does streams where he breaks down his thoughts on it.
It was good. I read that one.
Now, here's the thing. When I watch them, I always understand why Korea hasn't figured it out. Because if you ever listen to, I always read the translation that people post on Reddit of what he says. All I'll tell you is this. In all the seasons where Korea doesn't win, Cloud Templar, on the one hand, is able to analyze the game and what champions were strong and how they played. But whenever he has to address the answer of why China won, this is the key part, Monty, not why Korea lost, but why China won, it's always essentially just confusion. He doesn't really understand why. It doesn't make sense to him, and he always thinks they're somewhere playing inefficiently. Now, here's the problem with Cloud Templar. It's just you, homie. China's doing fine, mate. They're not having any sort of existential crisis. They're just playing League of Legends. Listen, I get it. The game's changed. A lot of what used to make Korea awesome doesn't really exist in the game anymore. But you have to accept it's a different game. It's like if I was a chess master and now I'm playing Fortnite, I can't act like Fortnite is chess and then tell everyone who wins against me in Fortnite, well, you wouldn't have really won if this had properly been chess like the way I play it. It's like, it's not chess, is it? It's Fortnite. All right. Play the way Fortnite's played.
Let's bring it back, full circle. It's the same scenario that happened with Summoning Insight and Riot, right? They're out there trying to be super professional. They're just looking at us saying like, how are these guys getting all the views just down and dirty? It's so chaotic. How does this even make sense? But you know what? We're still fucking winning. We're still winning. And you haven't figured it out yet. You keep on doing the same shit, LCS, and you haven't figured it out. So as much as similar analogy, some might say, to what's going on right now. But Atlus, you do have to turn your mic up a little bit more, I think.
I think I did.
Yeah, you did. You did.
It should be all right.
Yeah,
but, let me know if it's a little bit too.
No, it sounds great. You sound beautiful.
The analogy to bring it back to you guys, but
it always comes back to us in the end.
Yeah, I know. That's what I've discovered. I actually found that my brand for commentary that I came up with halfway through my OPL career was in fact what you designed for the LCK. So that was a new one.
So the thing about it was, when we talk about esports commentary, it's not that I did it. It's just that is the natural commentary for esports. That's it. It's not complicated. Like everybody can arrive at the same logical conclusion.
I think that fighting games probably started it off the best, in my opinion, where it's pure passion and they don't really care about what they're saying. They're caring about how they say it and who they're saying it with and who they're saying it for. And I think that that's what the LCK has always been really good at, is identifying who its audience is and then appropriately addressing them in a way that they can understand. And that way you can form friendships without necessarily needing to have a two-way conversation. And I think that you and Doa definitely were the front runners on that style of commentary in League of Legends. But it existed elsewhere for a very long time.
Yeah, Tasteless and Artosis obviously did that extensively.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, let's talk less about casting and more about the tragedy of Korean League of Legends, the fall from grace that we have seen.
Well, so this is an interesting topic that people have been sort of bringing up to me after MSC. They're like, "Oh my God, Atlus, what happened to the LCK?" I'm like, have you been in a box for 2 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we have not been the best for like a really long time. If you witnessed 2018 Worlds, that was where my heart broke irreparably, and we've been trying to find, the right surgeon to put it back together. And that hasn't happened for years. I actually thought that MSC was going to be a great opportunity for T1 just to trash everyone, because there was one team that stood a chance and they catastrophically failed against the worst team that we brought to the tournament. So after day one, things really started to fall apart. I think Gen G did sort of bring it back with their few games towards the end
some
of
good
day two.
ones.
Dragon X had a good start, that sort of thing. I think there were positives, but day one was, that certainly shed some harsh realities.
Also,
on what we saw the LCK as being this year.
Just to be clear, don't read in too much to what happened at Midseason Cup, because we don't know how seriously the teams were taking it, first and foremost. Obviously, like, the teams are going to say, oh, we took it extremely seriously. But in a world where you don't have MSI, which is in players' brains, the more prestigious competition, we don't know how much they were practicing. It was the first, instance that we saw of a new and developing meta that's going to define the summer split. So I think the takeaway there is, like, I perceive that as a fun tournament. I enjoyed it, but it's sort of Rift Rivals quality in terms of how serious I'm actually, or like Kespa Cup quality in terms of how seriously I'm actually taking those results.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that actually that is one of my biggest gripes with how LCK have been playing, though, because I think that one of the reasons why LCK hasn't been performing is because they still look at themselves as being the best. Our LCK teams still have this air of pride, of ego, of saying this is the premier region of League of Legends, and that hasn't changed. It's like what you were talking about with Cloud Templar, right? Like, not understanding that LPL's chaos tactics are actually going to work out, which they did. I learned that Lee Sin's a decent champion. Like, that was a really fun thing to learn. Thank you very much, Casa, for teaching me.
No, the stupid thing about that is LS's whole thing, which, by the way, I think it's a fun analogy, the whole sinners and saints thing. Is that the problem is, though, and he does acknowledge it, it's that it doesn't matter how many times you say that champion shouldn't. Well, it does. It just does. With human beings in current League of Legends, LeBlanc is fucking awesome. Lee Sin still works if you have the right champion. Of course it does.
Wait, though. You just wait until we have Android League of Legends.
Exactly.
That's what I do love.
That there has ever been.
That's what I do love.
Yeah.
Also, it is depressing that you have to, like, just hearing things like you learn that Lee Sin is a jungler. Korea's the fucking region that invented great Lee Sin play. InSec is the reason Lee Sin is good. So it is depressing to hear, like, and to see that these kind of styles of play have gotten so outmoded. And to reference Cloud Templar's thing, I do think it was interesting what he was saying in the latest translation that I read, where he was talking about, first off, I don't even agree with him, so let's get that out of the way. But when in his analogy, he was basically saying, like, well, if LCK macro is at like a 90 or a 95, right? And he just says it feels like LCK is trying to take their macro from a 95 to a 97, even when they have like an 80 in terms of mechanics or team fight ability. And it would be easier to raise that 80 to a 90 than it is from a 95 to a 97. Whereas, so first off, I also disagree that where I disagree with him is that LCK macro is not at a 95 right now. If anything, they're getting out macroed by Chinese teams in the late game as well. So where do you go with that?
Also, what sort of noob is this guy? Is he just reading the scoreboard? Like, if anything, the games that Atlus just referenced were actually Dragon X and Gen G definitely had some best of ones where they looked straight fire. Those games to me show that Korea still has amazing player strength. Like, listen, I think Dragon X is a bit of a flawed roster, but even then, some of those players are the best players or among the best players at their position. They have some players that are fucking bangers on that team.
I mean, Faker had some amazing individual games too. Faker
so, like, to me, the idea of the mechanics is what's off in Korea. Like, what? It's everything else, mate. It's how you draft. It's how you view the game. Yes. It's how perhaps you even compose teams currently. These are probably more pressing matters to me.
And I think that a lot of it is sort of comes down to how coaches actually put. I like that you mentioned the draft, but I think that it's where coaches are getting their information as well, because I think so much of it is derived from Korea v Korea scrims and not actually sought for elsewhere in the world, right? Because we see these micro metas develop in the LCK, and it's happened over the last 2 years. You know, the years of heartbreak that I brought up earlier. Like, it's been happening this entire time. And it's been LCK comes in with this meta that they figured out, and they're like, look at my beautiful, shining golden egg of this wonderful meta that we've created for you guys. We've built it again. It's like it's season 3 all over again. Isn't this the hallelujah moment? And then we get crushed because we don't understand that the things other regions are doing are good. And the things other regions are doing are things that we should be looking at and being concerned about. Like, maybe we should like figure out that, oh, this team's doing this, and therefore we can mold what we're doing in order to counteract that. Like, I feel like that was what Korea was so good at in the past. Like, Monty, you are the expert on this because you were here in this country while they were winning. But every single time you saw SKT go up against any opposing team, you saw them dismantle what they were fundamentally trying to do as a team. they just dismantle it. They
If
knew
people
exactly
don't remember,
what was coming towards
if you
them,
remember
and then
Atlus,
they threw it back and they did it better. Like
there was that really famous concept, which actually is a Korean way of doing things, where they would sometimes in game one of a series give power picks to the opponents just to see what actually happens when we give you your full form, basically. Then when they beat you with those, they'd be like, right, let's start banning those and just destroy them completely. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, they would just break down who you were fundamentally as a team. And at the end of it, you hadn't just lost the game. You were like psychologically broken. That's why no one thought Korea could ever lose. That's what happens if you're the Kings, you know.
We're in best of ones now. And so you can't just throw away a game one like they did actually in MSC like a couple of times, you know? Like, I felt like the drafts were super strange. Like, this Yasuo Gragas obsession is the weirdest, most aggravating thing in the world. Like, Cuz is the best Gragas jungle in the world. I think that is almost a fact at the moment. Like, even statistically, we don't like going on statistics necessarily, but everyone's seen what this guy can do with this champion. And then they give it to the bottom lane? Like, why? Like, what? Oh my god.
Well, it goes
It's a
back
tragedy.
to playing to your strengths too, and
Yeah.
I think that honestly is part of the issue, because if we talk about LS's view of the game as being this really idealized manner, which I think is a very interesting way to view the game. I enjoy viewing it in that way at certain moments. But the problem that you get into is that in scenarios like the one you're talking about, there is a difference between the ideal way to do it and maybe the best way to do it for you as a team, and what is going to give you the best way of winning. But I think the sort of disease that crept into Korea is because they always were capable of playing, at the best teams, I should say, were capable of playing the ideal manner, right? For most of the history of the game. So they could play that way. The problem is that it is impossible to play in an ideal manner anymore because you simply don't have the information to make decisions. The more that you roll back the vision, the more that you roll back information in the game, it means that at any given point in time, teams have to make decisions with less information than they had previously. When we're talking about game states that existed in years past, where you could have nearly total information in some scenarios. So the way to play perfectly is very tenuous, I would say, at this point in time. You have to flip the coin in every game you play.
I think you bring up a beautiful point, because that was what the LCK used to be, right? It was making the 100% play that you could make and your opponent couldn't. And now League of Legends is purely built on risk reward.
Yes.
Everything about it. So you can only have limited amounts of vision, so you put them down in the points where you can get the most value out of them, right? And I think the LCK has figured that one out relatively well, as far as like getting their vision in the appropriate positions. You saw Gen G, like, their vision in their first game of MSC was like a dance. It was beautiful. It was glorious, like going to the opera, something like that. It was absolutely stunning. But if something goes wrong that sort of like throws away that house of cards that they've set up for themselves, they don't necessarily understand how to pivot back, because you don't have that sort of entire all-encompassing knowledge that you used to have. Whereas like in comes an LPL team and they never really warded anyway. They were just like running headlong into you and saying like, hey guys, do you reckon you can back me up if something goes wrong here? Like, that's the sort of mindset that the, League of Legends has morphed into since Tracker's Knife was gotten rid of, right? Like, and I think that that's something that the LCK understands, but they haven't actually given away what is the biggest problem, which is their need for perfection in so many of these moments. They need to know far more than is possible to know. And instead, like, you've got to play on the front foot. There's so much of this like reactionary sort of gameplay, which is why it's so incredibly stale at the moment, like meta-wise, and why champions like Lee Sin don't work, right? Because Lee Sin works so beautifully in chaos. He works so well when you can catch someone out and have the rest of your team so much more ready in order to actually strike on an opportunity. But like, opportunistic gaming isn't what LCK is known for, and is something that we have to learn. Because like you've brought this up already, Thorin. I actually thought that was a beautiful point. Like, the mechanics in Korea it's still unbelievable. Our players are still extraordinarily talented, and you can like go and watch any stream.
That's why it doesn't make sense. It's why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Korean players are still exported from the region because there simply aren't enough slots on Korean teams to contain all good Korean players, right? Or teams are making these extraordinary offers from other, to have these Korean players play in other regions because they're recognized as very individually talented. And that's why it's so
and
wacky.
The Shy are Korean. Can we stop just ignoring that and pretending like the Chinese or something? Like, they're pretty fucking Korean.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, in
I believe the Shy didn't even speak Chinese.
50% of Korea won. 50% of Korea won, right? Because
exactly.
Duke was up there in the top lane too. So don't worry. We still have half a victory in 2018. It wasn't all over.
Right, and that's what we said last year about Fun Plus Phoenix. Like, the difference is that when IG won, they won off of Korean carries.
He's Chinese now, by the way. Doimi's been there for way too long and didn't have an LCK career, so he's Chinese.
Okay.
They can have him. They can have him.
Yeah, by that logic, the Shy is also Chinese, but that's okay.
Well, basically, yeah.
But my point is like, what was so good about Fun Plus Phoenix from a Chinese scene perspective is that the Korean players weren't even the best players on the team. So finally, it was like China being carried by China. Right? It's important that happens if you're looking to have a long-term success, right?
I mean, that's why top esports are so exciting, right? Because this is an entirely Chinese team outside of Kasa being from Taiwan, but this is the first sort of super team from China that we've seen that doesn't have Koreans since like 2015, and this team looks so exciting and I cannot wait for Worlds. Like, I had this oh my God, it was so hard because and just to address this, we were commentating the MSC final from LoL Park, and we had to. Okay. If there was a chance to give it to the LPL commentators, we 100% would. And I know it was weird having two LCK casters, two LCK play-by-plays because LS was stuck in his house because of a corona scare. But yeah, the two of us commentating this LPL versus LPL final. But during that time, man, I fell in love with top esports. That team is just so good.
I mean, they're so fun to watch.
It's so
I agree.
Cool to see like some national pride now coming out of China almost purely.
So where are we going, I guess, is the next question for LCK. We've seen, unfortunately, even though in best of ones we saw some good games, it seems like it's like a systemic meta problem or coaching problem more than that. Some teams that, like KT, that rattled off that huge win streak in spring, they've made some changes. I'm not sure that bringing Smeb back, given the quality of his play last time we saw him, or adding UCal or whatever to this roster, is that going to make them into contenders? Because I think not.
No, and I think that there's been a lot of interesting changes actually throughout all of the LCK, and the one thing that I think is the biggest sort of sign of hope is that we've had so much cycling of teams, right? We've had so many new teams coming up. You've got APK Prince that have now name changed to Solhay One Prince. They are still, looking okay. They've got Mickey just joined the roster, so look, who knows what's going to happen there.
Here's the crazy thing. Here's the crazy thing about Mickey. Here's the crazy thing about Mickey. He actually might be one of the players to break through the LCK playstyle because he always played crazy. That was his thing. His thing was taking risks.
Exciting, man. Like, this because I think this was in the period where it was you sort of handing the reins over to Papa in the LCK, and it was when I just arrived. Was when sort of Mickey was making his sort of debut, and he was so exciting, and it was so cool watching him be weird all over the Rift, and that's what we needed.
But I think it's what Korea needs. Like, I don't think he's going to be the best player, but I do think that introducing his play style is good for Korea as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that, Noguri did a similar thing on the top side of the map, and then you had a lot of, carry top laners come into the LCK as well. And I think that it even influenced a lot of players that were already there that weren't necessarily performing, like Rascal, who had a fantastic end of the season in 2019 before Dragon X exploded and then reformed again. Like, there are certain influences that can happen that can really be a good thing. Whether it's going to be fast enough is going to be the big problem, because at the beginning of 2020, there was a huge upheaval. Like, So I sort of took MSC with a grain of salt. It was very depressing because I did have a lot of confidence in what T1 were going to do, but all of our teams basically completely reshuffled all their players, right? After a 2019 that was a disaster for the LCK, outside of maybe T1 doing okay, but otherwise everything else was just awful. We had organizations exploding. We don't want to talk about Griffin. Thankfully, they're gone. And now we're sort of in this settling period, right? And of course, when a planet's going to be formed, when this beautiful mecca where there's going to be life growing and all this sort of stuff, it's got to be molten rock first, right? And it's in the molten rock phase. And I just don't know whether we're going to, actually get some ground under our feet that isn't really, really hot before, the end of summer. And I'm really hoping that maybe, Team Dynamics even coming in, like that's a team that I'm excited to watch because they were really cool in the promotion tournament. Like we've got, a lot of new stuff happening here, and with franchising just around the corner, I think a lot of our teams are going to be getting far more serious moving into 2021. And I think this year's Worlds is going to be super important for Korea as far as how hard these teams are going to be playing, let alone the fact that Deft said that he just wants to go to Worlds and win before he retires. It makes me really sad.
Well, the thing is, though, that's the team that I find the most interesting is Dragon X. Because, like I said, to me, their main issue is roster flaws. Like, I think Pioshik just didn't look like he was ready at times this year. I mean, obviously, the guy just came in. I think Doran actually...
What does Pioshik remind you of, though? Who does he remind you of as a player? If
who
you're
we're
going to
go
see
with here?
like a veteran player anywhere in the world, who does Pioshik remind you of?
You want me to actually answer this?
Yeah, I want you to answer it.
I'm going for a Westerner here, you want?
No. You were talking about it before with Kelsey.
Oh, right. Who were we talking about before with Kelsey? What did we talk about? Which players? You mean Casa?
No, I
Tian?
mean Ning.
Or Ning? All right.
Seriously,
Ning,
Dragon X
right,
plays
okay.
exactly the same way as IG when they it's almost like they're trying to do old IG now, because you look at that roster, they are permanently pushing. This is a roster that's just in your face at all times with no regard for where anyone is, and Pioshik then has to deal with it.
Here's the thing though, mate. That's why I actually think Dragon X is, I won't say the future because I don't know if they'll get it together, but why I think they're the team that has the chance. Because first of all, CV Macc has shown his entire career he is willing to completely go against the Korean meta for his drafts. That's what he always did in Griffin. And then look at the players they've got. If you're starting your team with Deft and Chovy, you've already got two superstar players there that can be the best in the world at their role. So we're already checking a lot of the boxes. And to me, he's one of the few coaches who will think outside the box. And if he gets the right lineup together, could do it. Now, he hasn't been able to get past, even when he was a Griffin, he couldn't get past the T1 hurdle, unfortunately. So it's never happened. But the difference is when I look at Gen G and I look at T1, they feel like they're way more within a certain like limited framework of what they're going to do, and they're just going to be the best at doing that. So I don't know if I can believe in those teams. Whereas I figure if he gets this one together still, it's not impossible. I will say I thought Doran was a little bit underwhelming at times, but he's clearly got some potential.
Yeah, and he's okay.
He's good enough.
I look bad, but I think everyone did during the MSC tournament, so that's not so difficult.
You're also just not expecting Doran to be the one to carry this team, nor does he have to. No. Like, he's a role player, and that's totally okay on a roster that has like Chovy in the mid lane, right? So that's not really a big deal.
I actually really like that he's a role player, and I like that he still plays the way that Dragon X want to play, right? Because he's a role player that shoves and creates pressure the entire time. He role plays as a star top laner that doesn't necessarily like. Does that make any sense? Like,
he's out there LARPing like a motherfucker,
sort of sacrificing himself.
Put it this way, Jackie Love in IG used to do that when they never even used to play around his lane. He used to play like he was Uzi I, and the jungler's coming any minute. So it's fine that I'm like, like right under your tower.
Any team. That's why Top looks so good. He's just a mainframe. He's sitting there. He like has decent mechanics. But actually, he's just this gigantic brain of League of Legends. He just build teams out of nowhere.
All right,
Atlus.
And
that's why IG looks lost and why Top looks amazing.
So we got to move on to our next guest. We're doing rapid fire guests this episode. So before you leave, we have to get some predictions from you for Worlds. Now, LCK, tragically, only 3 spots at Worlds. What has happened? Who is making Worlds?
To me, I saw the last Worlds. Should only be 3.
That's true.
There you go.
You're right.
Remember,
you're
China
right.
only got 2 at like fucking season 2 Worlds or whatever, and season 3 Worlds. So fuck y'all.
I didn't understand why people were salty about that. I'm like,
it's fine.
No, it's like,
exactly.
It's like, it turns out performance does result
and
in
also,
more teams being there.
In the rules for years.
Yeah. It was stupid. Obviously, we all agree that this is how it should be. Anyway, your top 3 LCK teams.
Oh god, this is so hard.
Who's going to Worlds?
Well, I think T1. They're still our best team, and I think that MSC was a blip, and I think that they will definitely be our number one representative. I think secondly, I have to put DRX because I have to believe that they'll figure it out. And I'm sort of like, this is an idealistic sort of top 3 scenario, because if DRX are up there, it means that they've fashioned their playstyle into something that works. And I think their playstyle is the closest to the one that we should be using.
They also have arguably the highest ceiling of any LCK team. Like in terms of pure raw skill on this roster, it's crazy.
Yeah, and also Kelsey brought this up earlier on, but I think that we are moving into a meta that's built on support, and I think Carrier is one of the most incredibly talented
banging, hasn't he? What a revelation! Yeah,
he's unbelievable. So I think that Dragon X are definitely second on my list. I'm really wary about Gen G in a weird way, because normally, like, their brand, it's so easy to just tack on a Gen G at the end, you know.
Oh, if you're skeptical, can I make you a counter offer?
Yeah,
would you care for a Damwon Gaming? Would you care for a Damwon Gaming to get it all together and go to Worlds?
Oh God, man!
Because the problem is when they do win games, I'll start believing again. I mean, I don't want to see them lose all the games after. But
have you like latched on? Has your KT fandom latched on to Damwon? Is that what's
no. That's the KT fandom.
No,
I do like carrying top lane.
No, he's a Flame fan, so therefore he likes Damwon.
I just like the way it all runs around the goal.
So I think we're okay. I think as far as dark horses are concerned, I think Sandbox are going to be really fun to watch this season because of Yamato Cannon moving over as the first Western coach, the first European import that we had outside of Woodid, I guess, is Yamato Cannon as a coach, and I just think that's so good. They've been focusing on the voice, and obviously as a commentator, I like voices, so Yamato moving over is brilliant. Irove joining from, I guess, Griffin, and change his name back to Cabby, so getting serious. And I think that this might mean that you can have Gorilla with more of a, you know, father of the team type role to help their mental and all this sort of stuff. And I think that Sandbox do have a lot of potential on their roster as well. So I think that's a dark horse in the LCK. But no, I don't think that it's going to be Damwon unless they do something absolutely insane. Plus, Zephyr is now their confirmed head coach, and he has the worst drafts in the history of Korean League of Legends, in my personal opinion. Some of what he did this year was just woeful. So yeah, I think that it's probably going to be Gen G. But otherwise, I think that there's a lot of teams that do have some potential. I think Hanwha is worth looking out for as well, because this is a team that has a whole lot of financial backing, and they just picked up Viper, who's out of the clutches of Griffin finally. And he is extraordinarily smart. If you've had a conversation with him, he speaks perfect English, uses bigger words than I understand, and has never been out of the country.
Sounds like a great guest for our show. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Well, like, this is the thing, right? And they were always on lockdown in Griffin, so maybe now that he's on Hanwha, he's going to be an opportunity. But he's teamed back up with Lehens, and so that's going to be super fun to watch. I think Haru is a player that can have very high highs if the momentum's working out, and I think that Lava moving into number one spot in mid is definitely going to be better for the team. So I think that Hanwha Life alongside Gen G for third, in my opinion. But that was very long-winded. I apologize.
It's okay. Thanks for joining us, Atlus. I know it's like 3 a.m. there, so we'll let you go to bed. Yeah. We're going to change to our next guest. Quick break. Curry, coach of FlyQuest, is going to be on next. See you guys in a couple. All right, we're back. Quickly, Curry, he was at his computer, ready to go. Very exciting. So, Curry's next. He is going to be the coach of FlyQuest, who has had a revitalization, a regrowth this year, if you will, from their previous shitty branding and shitty play style into much better branding, although still with the name FlyQuest, that's something that needs to be worked on. But significantly better play, taking second place, and so it's a very exciting time to be FlyQuest. So Curry, what have you been changing this year as part of FlyQuest, and what are the big reasons you think behind the team's success?
I think the biggest thing that I want to change when I took over as head coach was just make sure the team had a lot more of a direction. I think the way the team had played in the past, the way that the team was built in the past as a roster, is there was not too much direction in terms of like the players we wanted to put together, what players we wanted to play around, how we wanted to play the game. So the way we approach the offseason is we really want to put together players who wanted to work together. So I think getting Tristan, PoE, and Ignar to come together. They played previously on Misfits, and there was just a lot of synergy. They could play really well. Right now, the way that the game is being played is usually just play mid support jungle. And if you have a really strong mid support jungle, it's really easy to play the rest of the game. And so the way we approach the all season is we want to get players who want to work together, who know how to play the game, know how to play the map. And from there, we want to create a culture where we knew we were going to be bringing on a lot of veteran players. And for most of my career, I've worked with veterans. And we wanted to build a culture where the players had a lot of input on how they want to play the game, on how they wanted to approach situations, and how ultimately that we want to play as a team. I think one of the things I've learned from just working a lot is that when players are really good about how they talk to each other, how they discuss the game, that just leads to a lot more creativity in game, a lot more explosiveness in the game. And I think here at FlyQuest, we've done a pretty good job of making sure that the players know how to talk about the game, they know how to talk about each other, they all have their own strong opinions, but they also know how to kind of come together and reach compromise without like too many hard feelings, and just being able to like move forward from there and like get on the same page about playing the game.
Right, Monty asked you sort of the very polite, professional version of that question. I'll rephrase. Here's my version, Corey. Right, your team finished second in the LCS, and I'll tell you what, not a human being on this fucking earth thinks they're actually either the second best team or could have won this LCS split. Everyone thinks they are a placeholder that is an indictment of how bad the rest of LCS is and how far ahead Cloud9 is. And thirdly, most people actually thought even EG had a better roster and could have done more damage against Cloud9. So here's the question, right? Why aren't FlyQuest what we all think they are? Like, why are you going to be a contender to Cloud9? Why could it be a team that could go to Worlds and do damage? Come on.
I mean, I think there's people underestimate our team a lot, but honestly, our players are just really good. We have the top players in pretty much all our roles. If you just looked at all our playoff games, like going back to last split, I don't know, people say that we like overperformed or whatever, but we played 19 games in playoffs. We played every single one of the teams that other people consider the top teams, TSM, EG.
Yeah.
We beat them pretty handily. We dropped better than those teams. We lane better than those teams. We team fight better than those teams. Like, just consistently across the board. And when it came down to beating C9, like, they just played better than us on the day. But for us in those games, looking back at them, we like, for the games is like they just won a couple of team fights that very easily could have gone our way if we played a bit better. And to us, people think that there's this giant gap between us and them, but to us, we don't see it that way at all. We actually think it's a lot closer. And the other thing that people don't even consider or talk about is we started performing a lot like better as a team, a lot more consistent as a team when we brought in Zolo. And we only brought him in towards the end of the split.
That's true.
Yeah. If anything, you've got that excuse, right? And I think like, not excuse. Excuse. Some might say excuse. Some might say improvement, because obviously you brought him in super late. And so at the very least, you can say, hey, once we get more integrated with Solo, we took second place barely having practiced with Solo and playing most of the season with Viper instead, the worst Viper. Not the Korean good Viper, but the Riven only Viper. But this Solo actually was a bit of a revelation, and so introducing him into your lineup is something that can at least improve your ceiling. Like, that's just, I think, objectively true.
Yeah.
I've got some questions along. Oh, sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, we had only played with him a couple of weeks, and obviously he was great. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was great for the team. But we only really scratched the surface of how much we worked with him, how much the players like got used to work with him. Me and David Lim had worked with him before, but we had to get like reintegrated with working with him. And now, like, already in preseason, like, now that the team has had time to gel, there's not like a lot of pressure of, oh, we have this new player who we have to play on stage in a week. We got to rush things and figure it out fast. We've had a lot more time to like take it slow, figure out exactly what his best role is, and keep working with him. And it just seems like going to have this whole split to integrate into the team. There's no reason why we can't be just as good as C9.
Because the thing I find interesting, which I want to ask you about with FlyQuest, is if people don't know the history of the lineup of these players, these are all rejected players. Santorin obviously was long ago cast out of the fucking paradise of TSM. Although for a jungler, that's like fucking getting reincarnated from hell into reality again. Like, doesn't matter where you end up. It's like, fuck, at least I'm not there. So then you've got like Wild Turtle obviously was cast aside. Power of Evil was just on like CLG and no one ever thought he'd ever be relevant again. Ignar was coming from that period where no one gave a fuck about him over in Europe. And then obviously you brought in Solo, who everyone thought his career was over because he was labeled toxic. Now, what's interesting to me is you've got all these basically like players who have an upside, but no one else sees it, or they're not willing to see it, or they can't get the upside. So how did FlyQuest do this? Because, like, for example, when you reference Ignar and Power of Evil, I understand why people thought they were overrated in other teams. Some of the other teams they've been in, they couldn't do any of the stuff they wanted to do. But one thing I appreciate about the way that you guys have used Power of Evil, for example, is you seem to understand the guy's strengths and just let him do that shit. Like, let him do those ridiculous, weird counter matchups that only he thinks is a counter matchup. But you know what? If you let him do it, he will win some of these. You know, to me, he's a player who goes against global meta thinking. Same with Ignar. Like, Ignar's not just doing that because, but roaming support's a really good start. He was doing that when everyone had fucking Ardent Center and no one roamed. What are you talking about? He's going to do it anyway. So the point is, you've got to find a way. I'd make the analogy to that Last Dance documentary. It's like having Dennis Rodman. You don't get Dennis Rodman in your team if you think he's going to go to bed at 9 p.m. and just play like a normal player. You know he's not. He's going to play his own style completely. So you got to embrace that if you bring these people in. So you got to activate them.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, we brought these people on, and I think the way we had seen them in the past, like when they were on their best teams, all these players have been successful in the past, right? Like Power of Evil, Ignar, obviously huge success on Misfits, Turtle and Santorin, they won on TSM. But just from what we've seen with the players is that they've just been really handicapped by whether it was like the other players playing with them, the way they approach the game. And our approach was just like, hey, we can, obviously if we want to, we can just tell these players exactly what to do. But what's the point of that when they're already so skilled? They've had success in the past. Why don't we just help them like recreate that success instead of trying to like make them into the players we want them to be? Let's just let them be the players they are and just enable and support them as much as possible. And for a team like FlyQuest before, that was kind of like lacking a lot of direction, having these players come in who had a really strong idea of how they wanted to play the game, what exactly they wanted to do, and just making sure that they were put in those situations as consistently as possible is just what makes us like a good team. Because I feel like other than C9, all the other teams in NA kind of like lack direction. They lack like a coherent play style, the way they draft, the way they play games, the way they just their whole approach is just they don't really have like a good approach to the game or approach that like makes sense. So their games are all over the place. Like one day they'll play one way, one day they'll play another way. It just seems like they'll just latch on to kind of like whatever they
But enough of that TSM.
Monty, like this. Here's the analogy you'll like, right? Because one thing I also appreciate very much about Power of Evil's game is the way he is bizarrely the ultimate kryptonite to Bjergsen. Because here's the scenario, Monty. You'll appreciate this. Anyone who's a fan of NFL quarterbacks, I'm sorry to break and burst everyone's bubble, but the NFL isn't only the best of one fucking playoffs. You play 16 games in the regular season. That's your career as well. So if you count all the games that a player played, I don't give a fuck what anyone listening to the streams thinks. Peyton Manning was a better quarterback over all of those games than Tom Brady was.
Yes.
Watch the games.
Also Tom Brady had Belichick. Tom Brady had Belichick.
Even putting that aside, in the playoffs, yes, obviously Tom Brady won a lot more playoffs, and I would say was probably more clutch in some of the games, but that doesn't change the fact that that's like 3 or 4 playoff games versus the 16 that you play in the regular season. So in the same scenario, Monty, you know how I feel about Froggen versus Bjergsen. So on the one hand, it's annoying, right, when the guy that you think's not as good has all the championships. But you know what? Are you ready for the analogy? Just as Peyton Manning had his goofy little younger brother come along and fuck up Tom Brady's world in 2 of those massive Super Bowls, in comes Froggen's little brother, Power of Evil, and what happens? He'll be back in the ass. Exactly. There's the analogy for you. That's what for anyone who likes the NFL. Kiss.
That is a great analogy. I am a huge Power of Evil fan in general, just because I think like what I love about him, and I've said this before, is his moment-to-moment decision making. He's an incredibly creative player from a micro perspective. Like this guy, he comes up with solutions to problems in unique scenarios that I've never seen before. And like, he thinks very, very fast. And that's what I love about him as a player is like, I would feel comfortable putting him into almost any situation because he is so intelligent in the way that he plays his micro game. And it makes me love that guy. Like, is he the most versatile mid laner? No, but when you give him the tools that he's comfortable with, he is very creative and expressive with those tools in ways that you don't see from players who play those same champions.
Yeah, no, that's like totally spot on. Like when it comes to playing the game, I think he's definitely the most creative player I've ever worked with. Like the way he views the game, I mean, especially when he's side laning, when he plays like LeBlanc, when he plays even like control mages like Ori, the things that he's looking for, the things that he knows how to call for in terms of resources. Like I've never really worked with a player who's able to like call for those kind of resources, look for those kind of plays, see the opportunities that like no one else is really seeing. And there's just a lot of trust from the team that he knows what he's seeing. And the most fun part about it is just like watching him and Ignar, because Ignar is also a very creative player in his own right, and they kind of always see the same plays. Like if Tristan sees a play, like Ignar is already running there too because he saw the same play, and they're already on the same page. There's just been so many times in scrims and on stage where it's like they're not even really speaking to each other; they're just running to do the same play, and it's really interesting to watch because there's just so much synergy in between them, and it's really easy for everyone else to play off of because they're just constantly talking or constantly just affecting, pressuring the map, and everyone just has to kind of like work with them and follow up on them.
So one of the things that I think could be a potential criticism of FlyQuest is that you guys fell into a meta that was more or less very favorable to you. And by that, I mean, Ignar was activated on, his best kind of engage and hook supports, which has been a core part of his identity as a player. And the fact that you did have this kind of pocket blitzcrank was enormously helpful to you throughout the season. And one of the other things that we can say is Santorin has never been the hardest of carry junglers. And in a world where we're moving into a meta that may rely more on Santorin and less on Ignar, how confident are you in FlyQuest's ability to make these adaptations coming into the summer split?
Honestly, I think that the meta is actually even better for us than it was at the end of spring.
Okay.
Surprising as to say. There's kind of this narrative around Lucas that he's not good or hasn't played well on carry junglers, but I can tell you
that narrative is history. Yes,
yeah,
but you can say that history is about to be changed. You are allowed to say that.
Corey, let me ask you it this way, because I can already see the disconnect that's happening there. I agree with Monty, but I also think I know what you're saying, which is this. If people remember, an infamous meme from Summoning Insight is when Stupid Local came on and said that Santorin had 9.5 out of 10 mechanics if Faker is a 10. Now, obviously, that is like the most memeable shit you could ever say. That, unsurprisingly, is still referenced now, years later. But I know what he means by that. What he means essentially is Santorin could play all these champions. Obviously, when he was in Challenge, he did. He played all the shit,
yes.
like, I don't know, fucking Kazakhs or whatever. Like, yeah, he can. The question is,
and he has had a good Nidalee in the past.
But the thing is, to me, he doesn't have the mentality of the carry jungler. That's the issue I would see. It's like, I could believe he could play these champions in solo queue, but in a live game, would he play a carry jungler and carry the whole game in the way that a like self-made would in Europe or something, you know?
Yeah, I definitely think he would. And I think he's done it in LCS before. When he first joined FlyQuest in spring, was that 2 years ago? Spring season 8. Like, it was all carry junglers. It was Kazakhs. It was mostly like Kazakhs, Rengar, that kind of meta. And Lucas was carrying every game for FlyQuest. Like, he was playing the meta. He was playing it really well. He was affecting the game. And I think just how the meta has been in the past like year and a half since then, it's just been tank jungler, Sejuani, Gragas, blah, blah, blah. Like, he hasn't really had a chance to show. And honestly, no one really has. That like they can play these carry junglers and do really well on them.
Well, except for Blabber, who actually did bust out the Kindred in the playoffs, right? So
yeah, I mean, other than Blabber, you're totally right. But I think now the meta's here, and Lucas is gonna do really well on it. He has been doing really well on it, and I think in terms of like the mentality thing, Lucas wants to carry games, and
good.
He knows how to carry games, and I think one of the issues maybe in the past has been his like comfort level. I think it's sometimes very hard to carry games, or there's a lot of pressure to carry games when there's not like as much trust in your teammates, or honestly your teammates haven't been the best. But kind of with the way the team is gelling now, Lucas is playing a lot more confidently than I've ever seen him play. And when he's playing confidently, he is no doubt like one of the best junglers.
I will do really well. So he was really good in by LCS standards. Obviously, everything is relative, but he was really good in spring, and he was one of the top performing junglers statistically by the eye test. Any way you slice it, he was up at the top of the heap, right? And I will say, to FlyQuest's credit and to Santorin's credit, what Thorin implied is true, which is that Santorin has never had the opportunity. He has never either been in a team that is good, that allows him to carry, or in a team that was good enough where his carrying would get them wins, if that makes sense. Like either
if you want to talk about fucking comfort level, I bet for him, power of evils, like if you were like a foster kid that went from all these families that just like was really terrible scenario, and then you come to this other one and the guy just the dad just goes, you know what, you don't have to call me dad, but I'm gonna love you no matter what you do, and you just walk and be stop playing with power of evil must be like for Santorin, like, oh god, he just tells me exactly what I needs from me, and he just accepts me for whoever I am. Meanwhile, Bjergsen was that one who was just like, why don't you know how to be your own man? God damn it! Like, I have to teach you the role. I'm not the fucking jungler. Like, give you.
Well, also, like he was always going to be subservient to Bjergsen's carry position within TSM, whereas in this case, I think that he has more room to flex. And so what I'm looking for from Santorin and FlyQuest is this is your chance, buddy. This is your chance, Santorin. You finally have it all. You have a carry jungle meta. You got teammates who are good enough to win games, and they're going to allow you to carry. So you've been waiting years for this, motherfucker. You better deliver. This is the time when you have to deliver finally.
Yeah, I think he will. Like, we've, I don't want to say too much about scrims, but we've been doing really well in scrims, and like we're really confident on the season.
So with that said,
we should ask him about some other teams now, Monty. Because I'll tell you one that I really want to get his opinion on is EG. Because EG already was good, but the most obvious glaring point that everyone made was the top laner wasn't that good. Kumo was like obviously struggled in certain matchups in the playoffs and thought he looked a bit whack. Now bringing in Huni, that's a fucking big time signing. Could obviously tank the whole org. Could also potentially, if they can make it work, be the reason why they become a contender. But
I love signings like this. Like, don't settle for fucking Kumo. Go big, go big or go bust, right? Like, at least try. So I actually love that EG did this, even though I'm not Huni's #1 fan by any means.
No, but it's the message is a good one. I agree. So what do you think of this move, though, Corey? Like, what do you think of? Obviously, there's a guy you've played against, scouted against in that regard. So what do you think of adding Huni to the mix of EG?
Well, I think it's definitely interesting. I think just the one thing considering rosters is they can't play Huni, Jizuke, and Bang. They have to choose between them. So if they want to play Huni,
they've got Viper
they have to play
though.
Definitely. Yeah, they have who?
Oh no, sorry, Kumo. Sorry, I missed. Yeah. So they might still have to rely on that, but there is also the long-term consideration of if Huni is coming into this roster, he will be a resident at the end of this split, even if he plays on Academy.
Yeah.
So the idea is next year they could use him and have the same lineup, but with Huni as well, right? Okay, yes.
But also there is a question of,
so maybe we don't see him much in summer. Then did you bring him in next year? Would that be your guess?
Yeah, I think that would be my guess if that's what they're aiming to do. But Huni is definitely still an option for them for summer as well, depending on how things go. The thing that I would just be worried about in that scenario is like I think the way that team played for EG is that they played really heavily around Bang, and like they played so much to bot side. Like Jizuke is always playing like roaming supports, like Talia, Zoe, like these champs, and then just like running bottom and 4v4 around bottom. And that was kind of like the strength of their team, is that they were really strong getting Bang ahead, and then they would get to mid game team fighting, and he would just play really well. So if they played Huni and put in Deftly, I think their playstyle would like kind of just completely flip, where they're not playing to bot side anymore. Now they're playing to top side.
Who is the coach of EG?
Irene,
that's right. Yes, the former CLG assistant coach, right? The reason why that's so bizarre to me, though, mate, is I feel like he doesn't know who Jizuke is. Because, like, first of all, if you ever saw already the Vitality team Jizuke was on, that was a top and mid team. That was a solo lane team. And then secondly, Jizuke in Europe is a fucking pop-off player. You give him his champions that he likes, and you just let him go to work. So, like what you were describing there, I always found that bizarre that they sort of made him like a different type of player. Like for me, if I'm going to have Jizuke in the team, it is to carry from mid lane.
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of were starting to figure it out. I think they were playing a lot of Rise.
By playoffs, they did.
By playoffs, they had it down. Like, he was playing a lot of Rise. They would play, like, Rise Lee Sin, and then they would just, like, let him go ham in the side lane, which is, like...
My concern is that's a one-dimensional play style, but sure. I don't
Yeah.
think
You didn't
they.
name it. It makes you look like a magician. They're like, "What are you doing?" I've done that joke enough times.
One dimension usually is pretty much all you need to be a playoff team. So yeah.
Great. So let's. A lot of people I've talked to are still discounting FlyQuest, saying that they're not going to make Worlds. So what are your quick takes on TSM now with Double Lift and Team Liquid now with Tactical?
For TSM, I don't really see much of a change. I don't think they fixed any of their core issues by adding Double Lift. I think the only upgrade they make is I think they'll just have a lot better synergy for bot lane. But I don't really think it solves the issue where I think their like top side is really weak. I think jungle position is still a huge issue for them, and especially in the meta that we're about to go to, like. If your jungle is, in the past, if it was like Sejuani Gragas meta and your jungler is like falling behind, it's really whatever. Like he just has to play team fights well. But now in this carry meta, if you're playing like the carry junglers and you fall behind in your matchup, you're just gonna solo lose your team the game. Where like you're a level down, it means like you can't contest or fight anything. And to me, that's like a huge issue for the team that hasn't really been solved. So I don't see like that change helping them at all. And for Tactical for TL, I think it doesn't really do much to change where they're at. I think by the end of the split, they were playing their best league, but that was with Peter, with Double Lift.
I've got a little prediction for you, Monty. It's a hater prediction, but whatever. That's my style. I've been one of the best in the world at crafting them. I think Team Liquid will be better than TSM. Even though I actually think, obviously Tactical, I don't think is as good an AD.
I don't think that's a crazy prediction.
In terms of his peak, but this is why. Because I actually think adding Tactical to their team constrains them and makes them less varied as to what they could do. So it will just be more obvious how they have to play the game. And I think they'll just be good. I think Jensen will have a really good season. I think Brox will finally be integrated.
Well, Brox is also like objectively going to be significantly better in this meta than Spica.
Oh, of course. But here's the problem.
So...
when you go to the TSM side of the equation, I notice everyone acts like they didn't even change the jungler. They act like all they did is upgrade Kobe to Double Lift. And so now Double Lift will carry all the team fights they think that Kobe didn't. And so therefore they'll be better. First of all, they've lost Stardock, who was giving them all those early leads that, yes, he then threw, but he was still giving them. Secondly, they've now got Spicker into the lineup, right? If your jungler isn't going to be top tier, how do you plan on reaching the late game team fights that Double Lift is going to carry? It won't even matter even if Double Lift is back in prime form. He is not going to be doing anything at that point in time. So to me, I agree. I don't think it addressed the fundamental issues of the team. I think it just gave them a different set of fundamental issues that they'll now have to start. And what will happen is halfway through the split, everyone will realize there's a flaw in this team. So we told you that at the beginning of the split, you morons, but TSM fans are slow learners.
By the way, one thing that flew under the radar in the offseason was, remember that job posting for a coach for TSM? Never saw any announcement of them hiring anybody. Weird. So
yeah, because at this point in time, being a coach or a fucking jungler for TSM's like being the professor of dark arts at fucking Hogwarts University. No fucker wants that job. You know what you want to get out for 1 year and then get fired by Reggie.
That reference was like the Chinese knockoff version of Harry Potter references. It was like, it like sort of looked like Harry Potter, but wasn't exactly right. But yes.
Close enough.
I don't actually know Harry Potter is. I don't know. You get what I was saying. You know what I was saying.
I did understand what you were saying. It was just hilarious.
I've never read a Harry Potter book.
It's all right. You're not missing anything. Anyway, so Curry, who is going to Worlds? Who are the three teams from LCS as we wrap up here?
It'll be us, C9, and EG.
Got it. So
And
you are
EG,
you are
right?
betting on an EG, regardless of whether they can use Huni or they have to mix up their imports.
Yeah, I think regardless of how they build their roster, I think like they have the most like defined playstyle, and they just have like good players.
Excellent.
In their teams.
We'll get you on for a longer show later on, Curry. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go get our next guest, Macc from MAD Lions, on. Our next rapid fire guest here is Macc, the coach from MAD Lions. Welcome to the show. Congrats on your better than expected finish with your mostly rookie roster.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about MAD Lions and your performance. You guys came in in the playoffs with a huge upset of G2. Obviously super important to you kind of your success this last season. No one expected it.
Totally legit result, not in any way match fixed. Just want to make that clear.
It was
from the outset.
completely and utterly match fixed.
Just want to make that clear from the
But
outset.
unintentionally
There you go.
match fixed. Unintentionally.
Here's the question. It's sort of a philosophical question: is if you unintentionally match fix a game, was it indeed match fixing?
I mean, isn't that an oxymoron?
You know.
So obviously, it was very unlikely you guys were going to be able to repeat that result. Some might say that even match fixing jokes aside, it may have been a fluke based on the online system. So let's talk about. Do you think that your team was helped from their rookie status, maybe not getting nerves by being online in that match instead of being in the LEC studio in Berlin, or would you have won regardless, you think?
I think it's really hard to say. I mean, there was definitely a really different atmosphere on that day, but actually I think regardless of the kind of online versus offline atmosphere, it felt like when we came into the office that day, everyone was just having a really, really, really insane day. Everyone woke up on the right side of the bed, and that day felt really different to all of our other series. I don't really know how to qualify it properly, but yeah, I think we would still have a pretty good shot. I mean, honestly, the series was like clutched on like a huge number of really random moments. So it's hard to say, and some of them were just like G2 mechanical failures. Like there's, I think the Ezreal game that we won where Jankos walks out of a bush and just like whiffs his cocoon point blank on RMA, and then we win the game because we kill him, and I think we take Nash off of it or something. Like those things, maybe they wouldn't happen on stage for G2. I don't know. As far as my players are concerned, I don't think any of them have huge nerves problems. So I would be inclined
to be fair. So
I mean, you wouldn't know, but I mean, I know them well enough already as people to be able to.
You can't know that, mate. Nobody can know that. Nobody can know that. Nobody can know it. No, I guarantee you. Here's the thing, mate. Nothing can prepare someone for what it's like to be in a Worlds final, in the Worlds itself, in the final of the LEC. The problem is, it's not. This is actually a flaw I want to just address very quickly. I won't make it a big rant, but this thing that people take that if you choke, it means that it's a character flaw in you as a human and that you're somehow bad or inferior is nonsense. Because here's what's funny. I've known players who didn't choke at all, and they were like famously like unflappable in those circumstances. And they weren't better humans. In fact, sometimes they were absolute arseholes. That's why they were so unflappable, because they didn't ever think they could fail. They had some of them were incredibly arrogant. So like, I always think people overvalue that aspect anyway, and because they're trying to draw it like you're the hero if you make it, and you're the chump if you don't, So that angle's overrated anyway. But the point I was going to make here was, you have to be in a really big scenario, I think, before that kicks in for a lot of players. Like, plenty of players could play like LEC, etc. And one thing I'll say, because it's a point that Peter Dunn actually made on the now ill-fated last ever episode of Elitist United, but it was a very good point, is people are forgetting the structure change in the playoffs, which is that matchup was the upper semi-finals because of the way the format goes now. But that's not the same as a semi-final in the old LEC, because semi-finals and finals famously take place often in a roadshow type setting, in Spain or wherever, Germany, it even was in Netherlands last year. Then that's the biggest pressure match, the semis or the final. The thing is, that match would already have just been a studio game. So technically, listen, it would have been the playoffs, that's true, but it still would have been the same studio that MAD Lions was getting in G2's ass during all the regular seasons. I'll actually give Peter Dunn his credit on that one. That does make it more plausible that result could have happened there. I agree. I might have my own debate as to whether it would happen if it was the grand final of LEC and it was in some massive stadium with, like, especially if it was in like Spain with 20,000 fans all chanting for G2. Maybe that would be different. Maybe it would be a different way. I don't know, but I think he's got a point there. I think it could have happened on stage in a real LEC match.
For sure.
I think it's implausible.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
not least because remember, MAD Lions could even have won by an extra game. They could have won 3-1.
Yeah. We very easily could have not entered one of our games, but that would be fun. So I kind of disagree on the point about not being able to know anything. Sure, you can't know what someone's going to be like in front of
know anything, but you can't tell me that you know your players well enough to know none of them would choke in a massive set.
I can't tell you that none of my players would choke in front of 8,000 people.
Yeah,
obviously, I can't tell you that, right? But I can tell you that I know that some of them have a really good tolerance for stress and high pressure situations already. And frankly, I think all 5 of my players are kind of psychopaths in a way, and I mean that in a complimentary way. In that they're really freakishly talented, and I think all of them have the personality to be able to make it in that way. We've also done a lot of kind of personality testing type stuff to see, which is like there's a elite performance athlete testing that you can do. It's really interesting. Super.
That sounds like the sort of shit that Weldon Green used to sell, but real.
I was gonna say it sounds like the stuff that Riot Light used to, send out psychological tests to the average League of Legends players, and they were running all these experiments.
I'm imagining Macc here as like the fucking whoever that guy was at the beginning of Blade Runner who was doing that like exercise to test whether that guy was a replicant or not. He's like, tell me about your mother, and then the guy just wigs up. I'm imagining him just doing it in the MAD Lions office, basically.
Pretty much.
I'm pretty sure, though, if you administered that test on most of European solo queue, that they would all have that same wig out response, except,
Well, the irony is that is often what makes you get toxic, is people inquiring about your mother. So, I can tell you.
You might come back with a fair few psychopaths in a US solo queue as well. But I think obviously it's really, really hard to say in hindsight, but I think that we have players who are psychopathic enough to be able to, if they wake up on the right day, which they did, just go and like flash on top of the G2 players and go and fight them and have fun with it.
But that's what you want. That's what you want. You basically want
for sure.
replicants. You want angry robots. That is actually the ideal esport player, is somebody who can just keep on going forever with the same rote practice, but also still gets angry enough to go crazy in games.
Oh no, the irony is LS would apply that test and then only hire the replicants. Obviously, if you pass it and you were human, he'd kick you immediately out. You can't play this brand of League of Legends.
I think it's a good test. I think we've discovered it.
For sure.
The Philip
Absolutely.
K. Dick Blade Runner test is what you need for top quality League of Legends players. So let's actually talk about those. So did you administer the replicant tests to them prior to signing them to this version of MAD Lions, or post? I'm curious. Was that part of the signing
post.
process? Oh,
Post. We now do it with all players. So that was the first time we'd ever administered the test. And it was super useful for everyone. Like getting to, I didn't know them at that point. It was like one of the first things we did with them, and getting to know them over the course of the split after doing those tests with them, I was like, holy moly, like everything in this is true. As you get to know them better as people. So that was super interesting. And now we do it with all players like instantly when we sign them, and sometimes before as well. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting actually.
so tell us about these tests then. What do you learn about the players by doing them?
Sure. So it's called the Riser Elite Mindset Performance Test or something like that. And it will give you basically a score in a bunch of different categories intended for athletes, from your grit, so your ability to push through uncomfortable situations, your creativity, your impulsiveness, your growth mindset, your like coachability, all of these types of scores. And then it will give you a big breakdown of a lot of different kind of character traits.
Can you give like an example of something that would be a test for one of those things? Like just pick one of those categories. Like what's an example of how they would test one of those things?
It's an odd test, and I have no idea how it like equates the answers you give with the results. I mean, I've done one as well, and basically it gets you to rate a bunch of things on a scale. So I'll give you one example, which was so 1 is I don't agree with this at all, and 5 is I completely agree with this. And it gives you the statement: people are either born smart or stupid, and they can't do anything to change. And the higher up on that scale you answer, the lower your growth mindset score, essentially, which is a bit flawed. I got a really low score because
if you don't agree with that, you instantly become a Twitter analyst. Legend has it. So.
I kind of do believe that a little bit. So I actually got a really low coachability score, quite ironically. I just happen to believe that I am one of the people that can improve, but most people can't.
I love it. It's okay. You don't have to be coachable. You just have to do the coaching. So it worked out, right?
Yeah,
That's fine. Lines up. Lines up. That's hilarious. When you brought in these players to the spring split, what were your expectations for the team? Because it certainly wasn't beating G2 in playoffs, even if it was just in one series, right? And making the big waves that you guys did.
Sure. So from a big picture perspective of what we were planning going into the season, ironically enough, the plan that we came in with as an org is let's go and scout a bunch of players. And the only players that we're going to sign are players that we believe can, within the space of 2 years, be better than their opponent on G2, because this is like a brand that is designed to win, right? And that is the standpoint that we came in from the absolute beginning. So that's kind of where we started off with it. Wait, what was the initial question? What was the expectation for the roster?
Yeah, for your first split.
Yeah, so I mean, seeing them play on day one, I was basically looking at them thinking, holy moly, we have insane mechanics and literally zero common sense. And I kind of figured that we were going to be a bit like 2018 Vitality. You know, I thought we were going to be that kind of team, which maybe we are, which is quite fun. I would like to think that we're 2018 Vitality, but slightly smarter. I would like to think that. I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, in a way, you sort of at the moment are playing the role that they had, which is that people mainly consider you like the new gatekeepers of the top tier. Like if someone can beat you, they probably can win LEC. If someone can't, they're not going to win LEC. So you kind of are playing that role at the moment, which is what Vitality used to be like. You know, like they themselves didn't win LEC, but they were a solid watermark, I think.
But yeah, so in terms of our kind of hopes, I realized pretty soon that like if everything would click properly, then our ceiling would probably be around third place. That was my guess. And if it didn't, then our floor would be like 7th maybe.
That's a pretty big range.
For
Yeah,
sure.
but he is also working with 4 rookies.
Sure.
So like
I
to
mean,
be
yeah,
fair,
it's
just going to shit you down, aren't you? You know.
I mean, it's rookies, right? Like one of one of our kind of briefs to our upper management before the split was like, guys, bear with us. It might be a bit rough in the short term, and trust me, there will be flashes in the pan where we will look amazing, but we will be extremely inconsistent. So please bear with us for the best part of a year. And frankly, I didn't expect things to be as smooth as they have been. So that's been pretty nice.
I mean, to be fair, you guys are like the best team that's part of your entire organization. So that's a pretty big win for one split into things, as it were.
It's not bad. I mean, CS is doing pretty well, right?
They are. But I would say, you know, relatively speaking, if we're talking about where bad, I don't know, maybe it's about the same. What would you say? It's probably about the same. If you take a global, if you take a global perspective to it, it's probably about the same.
Put it this way, the team in CS is probably maybe like the 11th or 12th best team in the world. And that's not that far off what I'd probably say MAD Lions are in League of Legends.
Yeah,
mind,
that's
Europe's
probably fair.
a pretty good region now.
Yeah,
it's probably similar.
It's not unfair.
So now, what do you think are the, like, okay, let's change this. I loved watching Shadow play. He's probably like my favorite rookie player that I've seen in the past several years. Helps that I love junglers in general, but like I just really, really enjoy watching this guy play League of Legends. How do you think, considering the champion pool that he had in spring, he's going to be faring or adapting into the summer split, where we've said coming in that there's a huge emphasis on this jungle role?
I think it will be pretty interesting to see. It's definitely a big dynamic change for the whole of our team, because last split basically it was just like, hey, get a pushing mid laner, draft Lee Sin or something that can be really aggressive, and then go and gank bot lane 24/7, right? So it's a big play style shift for us. I think Shadow will need some time to build up some confidence, but mechanically, there's no doubt that he can do this. If anyone had seen him play at an ERL level, he wasn't really known for being like this insanely Sin player that he actually is. But he was like a Kindred player when Kindred wasn't even meta, and we actually played Kindred against G2 in one of the games that we hinted. That was
that wasn't
really,
a great.
bad.
That wasn't a great.
that was not a great showcase of that. But I think he'll be fine. For sure, he has the mechanical capability. For sure, he has the ability to communicate in order to actually lead a team. I think it's just a case of confidence. It'll be similar to when we worked on Olaf with him. For example, like he couldn't play Olaf basically at all last split at the beginning, and we worked on him with it a lot on how to be like, okay, this is what I need from my lanes in this amount of time. You know, I need you to be here in 1 minute so I can mess this guy up on his grump or whatever the hell it is. I am going to do this, and this is our plan from level 1, and this is what you can expect during the game. And giving him the ability to structure a game plan out like that helped him a lot. But I think he just needs confidence and feedback and some TLC, and he'll be Gucci.
So what are your expectations coming into summer then? Like, considering your performance, would you take the same? Let me put it this way. If I were you, I would take the same thing again, because I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think you overperformed as a group of rookies in the spring splits. So having a level of consistency where you can hit that same mark again, to me, would be a very good result.
No, Monty. You've got to keep up on the scene, mate, because one of the other things they've done in this team is, to me, this team's nothing like Splice. The only thing about it that's like Splice is that Humanoid played on Splice. That's it.
Yes.
And some of the coaching staff obviously were there, like Peter Dunn. But to me, what I love about MAD Lions is that it's nothing like Splice. It doesn't have that whack playing style, doesn't have the same problems that they had in Splice. But one thing they did carry over from Splice was the insistence on playing defense on every area that a coach can play defense. So you won't know this, Monty, but they actually have gone out of their way on shows to tout the idea that a Rome can be a top tier elite carry top laner. And so I want to see that this split. So if the carry champions are available, Macc, I want to see those games where you guys flex all over the map. You just go there, give him some great games, feed it, Shadow, have him feed ganks to his lane, and let's just see some carry games, you know.
I will try my best not to disappoint you.
Is it a real thing we'll see this split, do you think?
So I think RMA, I think it's a bit unfair. I feel pretty bad for RMA because he's being compared to all of these other like literal psychopath freaks of nature rookies who are just coming in and like being like, "Woo, yeah, sure." But I think if you look at a lot of rookies, they usually take a split to develop. Ours mostly did not. I think RMA had a lot of stuff that he was dealing with, like he had a lot on his plate and a lot to adapt to. And he also was basically taking the D 24/7 because not everyone on our team was comfortable playing weak side yet, and he happens to be the oldest player and the most emotionally mature and the most stable.
Yeah, sure.
So he was a good fit for that.
Yes.
But that's so. I mean,
he was a
really
good fit for taking the D. Macc lol 2020. It's one way to put it.
Oh no! I'm sorry, RMA. So. That was our playstyle, right? And if you want to get good at League of Legends real fast, what you do is you pick a style and you specialize in it and you just go hard, right? And towards the end of the split, if you look at what happened when we played G2 the first time, we were playing all this random stuff that no one else was playing, but that was like really specialized towards our playstyle, like Marek playing Renekton mid because he can just get prio and go and dive bot lane 24/7. And then you look at the second series against like G2 and the series against Fnatic, and I mean we got dumpstered, right? Like we had like literally no reply to what they were doing because we were specialized and they were more generalist and they adapted faster than we did. And that's not a trap that we're going to be falling into again, hopefully, because you know we're going to be training a lot on being a more diverse and a more broad team because like suddenly people now think, at least some people think that we're a good team, right? Before there was this like, well, I don't think MAD Lions are a good team yet. And now we've come third, and people are going to be like, maybe we should study these guys a bit more. And yeah, you can't get destroyed in a playoff series like that and then not change anything, right? So moving forwards, for sure, we're going to be putting in a lot of work into RMA. I can say that at least from what I've seen so far this split, he's performing super well. He has played a lot of like random ass champions in scrims that have gone super well, and he's done really well on. So I'm feeling pretty good about him.
All right.
What do you make of the G2 situation? So in the playoffs, G2 obviously played pretty un-G2 like against you guys and ended up, taking a bad loss. They did rebound, but then by the time we get into the finals, they just completely and utterly destroy Fnatic in a matchup that many people thought, including myself, would be much closer. So it seemed like maybe that was the wake up that they needed. And obviously G2 is going to be swapping caps and perks around again coming into the summer split. Where is G2? Were they just slacking in spring, or do you expect them to see the full revival into their former glory? What were the problems that they were displaying in playoffs that they seem to have completely dispelled by the end?
I mean, it's funny because the second series against us and the series against Fnatic were also really un-G2 like, right? Like they suddenly decided that they were just going to pick like these ADC centric comps and play Maokai every game,
Yeah, that was
and like Wunder dropped like every side wave to just go and group and smack people, and it worked. And I don't think Fnatic adapted to it very well, but I think the big thing about that was like mad to me is I've never seen a team like just do that and decide that they were going to play the game a different way and be good at it, within like the space of 2 weeks, which was really impressive to me, and it caught us completely off guard. So that's the big thing, is that I think that they're just really good at adapting when they actually decide like, hang on a minute, hey, these motherfuckers beat us, no one beats us, and then they just like went and turned it on, So that's the big thing. I think it will be interesting seeing where we end up now with G2 because I mean, we talked about this last time I was on a show with you, I think, Thorin, where they'd always been this like really solo lane focused team because they had Wunder in the top lane, and then suddenly now they have Caps, and like they became this really bot lane centric team by like over the course of the split, where Caps has to learn to chop call from the ADC position, blah blah blah. And in order to do that, Wunder has to then sacrifice because you can't like do both sides unless you have Caps in the mid lane, and he just drops every wave and goes and roams. So it will be really interesting to see if they shift back to a solo lane dominant perspective or whether or not they're a bit more balanced or what it is. Because I think previously their playstyle was like really, really insane and really hard to counter. Because both of their side lanes, like Wunder and Perks and Mickey, all would just like kind of stack waves into you and push all the time. Like they would stack, like normally in League of Legends, you stack like one side wave at a time. Like one side of the map plays defensive and the other one plays offensive, and that's how it works. Whereas G2 would just be like, no, we'll just stack both, and if you come, we'll try and outplay you, and Caps will drop a wave and go and dive the other side of the map, or he'll just get Prio alone and go and dive the other side of the map. And if the dive works and you get outplayed, the game's instantly over at like 5 minutes. So we'll see if they go back to that type of playstyle. I think they will probably be scarier with Caps in mid. Overall, I think that Caps is probably a better fit for the identity of the players they have, because he's like more of a low resource guy, generally speaking, and Perks is more of a high resource guy, generally speaking. And if you have like 3 high resource guys in your team, someone has to give up. And a lot of last regular season, it was Caps, because Perks didn't roam in the same way that Caps did. And now it's just going to be Caps giving up again and them diving side lanes again. So I think they're a more like well balanced and probably a more complete team with Caps mid, which is a bit scary.
I think that was the general consensus regardless, but yes.
Not from G2 though. Like the most hilarious thing is they went on every talk show in the world, the whole split, to explain why everyone's overrating last year's G2 wasn't even as good. Like it was overhyped. Like this one's better. They're going to be better. And then of course they just made the swap that everyone wanted anyway. So it's as I always say, don't listen to the words, look at the actions, and they will always reveal the character of the person involved. So let's pivot and ask this then. What about Fnatic then? Because before the last 2 matches of that lower bracket where G2 beat Origin, you guys, after they beat Origin, when they beat you guys and Fnatic in the final, like everyone would have said Fnatic wins the league once you guys beat G2 the first time. Like they just looked like the best team. So with a team like that, after how bad the finals were, what do you diagnose are the issues? What did they change to become LEC champions? What do you think?
It's funny because actually coming into playoffs, I thought Fnatic was a way more well-balanced and diverse team than G2 was. Like a lot of the things that we studied in order to become a better team in the second half of the split were just Fnatic pods because I thought they played the map super smart. I think in the final, honestly, Wunder just really got the better of Bwipo, and that team is like really, really Bwipo-centric.
Well,
like,
Bwipo had an uncharacteristically bad series. He just looked like he was choking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened. He woke up on the wrong side of the bed, had a crap night of sleep, who knows? But I think that team is really, really Bwipo-centric. Like, if you looked at the way they played last split, it was usually like them getting an advantage top or like sacrificing everything so that Bwipo could scale on like Zac top without getting murdered by his lane opponent. And then suddenly he's even in the game at 20 minutes and then he's like completely impossible to deal with, right? So that type of play style doesn't work when you're losing top lane. And it can be a 2v2 thing as well. I can't remember that clearly if it was just like him getting smacked 1v1 or not. But yeah, I think that's what happened to them in finals. In terms of them for next split, I mean, they're still going to be a really scary team for sure because I think they innovate like pretty damn fast. Especially like on mid and top lane, they innovate a lot. And if you have carry junglers in the meta and you have self-made on your team, that's a pretty good place to be.
Well, to round things out, I know this has been a quick segment with you. You guys, LEC, have 4 slots heading into the World Championship. So since you took 3rd, you actually do have some wiggle room there. You could even take 4th place. And if Worlds happens, which we still don't know, to be fair, who knows what that situation is at the current point in time. But if it happens, which of the 4 LEC teams are going to the World Championship this year?
I think it's really impossible to not predict Fnatic and G2 going. For one, I think as the MAD Lions head coach, it would be pretty weird if I didn't predict us to go.
Well, you just finished third, so it's a reasonable prediction
Yeah,
as well.
it's
You only have to make top 4.
Yeah, the format makes it like really favored towards us to make it now because of the 3rd place, so that's really good for us. The 4th team, I think it's pretty hard not to predict Origin unless they have like a team boom implosion thing, which has happened in the past in Summer Split on Origin. So who knows? Again, like they would be the safe choice. There are quite a few dark horses in Europe though at the moment. I think Rogue have the potential to be a really good team, although they definitely fell off because I felt like they were a bit one-dimensional towards the end of last split. But for sure, they have the individual potential. Like all their players are super good.
Misfits with Kobe?
Misfits with Kobe will be really scary. I don't know what they're doing with the support position because they promoted DOS, but Denik is still on the roster. So
yeah, they implied like they'll try and use both or something, I think.
Yeah, so I don't know what will happen there. Maybe there'll be some teething issues, but if they sort it out by the end of the split, then they'll obviously be a super good team as well because, I mean, they'll have like 3 carries in their roster now, right? Like they actually have like a lot of carry potential on that roster now, which is pretty scary.
There's one more name surely has to be mentioned, which is XL, right? Because XL did some interesting moves themselves.
I wouldn't have put XL in as a dark horse. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch for sure. I don't think that it's going to like, I mean, unless it clicks instantly and they're suddenly insane, you know? But especially, I mean, Special's played LEC before, but Cry's like, it's really hard to bring in a rookie and expect him to play, like this guy's like a carry top laner, right? He plays like Ryze and Camille and all this stuff. So it's really hard to come in Summer Split and be like, hey, we're going to make Worlds. Here's our new carry top laner who's going to get us there. Like that's some serious shit that you're asking of this kid. So I think it's quite hard to predict for them. It's going to be really interesting to watch though, because I mean, as far as I'm aware, Youngbuck has kind of only ever had like dog top laners, no? Like he's never really played with like a hard carry split pushing like Fiora player top laner, and that's not a style that XL's play style last split like would work with because Xpect just drops every wave, and doesn't really like farm any jungle camps or anything like that. He just like pick one side of the map and go and dive it, kind of like Fnatic's old playstyle, right? So that's going to be a really interesting one to watch unfold. Honestly, I wouldn't even. I feel like the top 6 is really hard to predict in Europe because I think that even like Schalke towards the end of the last split were playing super well. Actually, I feel like they were really kind of more than the sum of their parts, if you want to put it that way. Like we actually struggled to close out games against them, and like I think scrims against them were pretty solid as well. So we'll see how they do. Even Vitality, like they have some really mechanically sound players. Like Labrov, I think is really good mechanically for sure. He and Comp. I think will suit each other very well playstyle wise. Milica I think is mechanically really solid as well. NG I've heard he has insane shot calling, so like who knows, right? Maybe Cabochard gets the right meta and he has an insane run of form and like looks super good again. So I think there are a lot of dark horses in Europe right now. So I think top 6 is actually super hard to predict.
So we went through all of the LEC teams. So at the end of the day, it's you, G2, Fnatic, and you have to pick another one. Go on record. Who else? Who's the 4th team going to Worlds?
It's really hard not to predict OG. So
okay,
let's just say OG.
Fair enough. But I do agree there have been some cool upgrades and meaningful changes across the LEC. Be starting that again this weekend. Thank you for joining us, Macc. We're gonna take a very brief break and then bring Jankos on as the final guest. We're back with our final guest, the ultimate guest, Jankos from G2. We just spent a lot of time talking to Macc, who is, of course, singing your praises, naturally. You guys are making a switch. I know you probably talked about this a lot. Caps and Perks are reverting back to their old positions. Why? Besides the obvious reasons.
I mean, I guess you could say that Caps didn't really enjoy playing AD carry as much as he would have thought at the beginning, right? And also Caps is a player that likes challenges, so he challenged himself by playing bot lane since Perks throughout the split was loud about. Well, he wasn't always happy playing AD carry. AD carry is a really mentally exhausting role where you get dived a lot, and it's not quite the same playing mid lane as AD carry, because as a mid laner you have like probably the most impactful role where you can either carry by farming for late game, and it's very hard to gank mid, so if you pick Azir Corki, you will never die. Or you can carry by roaming and pushing, like kind of FPX played with the jungle and mid lane throughout Worlds. So I think that the change he made last year was like more exhausting for him as he thought it would be. And then Caps also didn't really think that AD carry role would be that difficult to play.
He was talking about that.
So
and,
it's also
we just
challenging
felt
and significantly less fun, like you say. Turns out that if you have a brain, playing AD carry is not a particularly fun position, right?
I mean, it is fun in scrims, of course, right? Because team can play around you, and I don't really feel like this year AD carry is a weak role. I think like last year you had to play around AD carry a lot more, but this year in solo queue, in Europe at least, we have like Upset has like top 3 accounts in Challenger, right? And the second one is like mid laner, but like he has 2 of them in top 3 on top of just AD carry, I think, being really fucking strong role. And sure, you cannot like 1v9 early game, but a role that is so impactful, like probably the most impactful in late game, cannot have everything. So they are just used to a different play style, and that is why I think they didn't really enjoy playing AD carry much. But since Perix had like a break, 1 split break from playing AD carry, he's up to do it again because he didn't actually mind it as much. And now it's only half a year left, so even if it's like exhausting for him, it's not going to be as extreme as it was last year. And he also knows so much more about this role, and Caps just likes mid lane more, so it's like no hard feelings, we just decided it would be the best. I mean, basically Caps said he would like to go back to the mid lane. Perix said he doesn't mind, and that was it. It was not really discussed further with the teammates, but no one really cares. If Wunder would swap it with Perix, no one would carry that. We just kind of trust each other.
I love the fact that
like that, Monty, there's not much choice, is there? If Caps is like, you know what, I'd like to play mid lane again, and then Perks is like, whoa, no need to go anywhere else. Like the mid lane spot's still out, just keep it warm for you. That's all. You can play back, whatever. Fine, okay, I'll be ADC again.
Yeah. He's like, just think about how good you're gonna look after my season of mid lane. I like how he phrased it too. He's like, Perks doesn't mind, not like Perks is super
exactly.
hyped.
He doesn't want to. Of course not. Not would, right?
I do enjoy how you say like, oh, it's fun because you get to carry the game, but like I said, if you have a brain, the best AD carry players are in my opinion, the guys who are super, hyped up on their own mechanics, and they're like a cannon, right? The cannon doesn't aim itself. You take the cannon to a location, and someone with a brain aims the cannon, right? That's the way I think of the AD carry position most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for sure. I agree to some extent. I mean, I think that right now mechanics are very important in League, but they are not as important as just like playing a good League of Legends as 5 people and making good decision in game. So I don't really think that AD carry is specifically different from any other role. I think overall you need people with brain and not people with hands.
It's just a joke.
And preferably you want both.
Yes, obviously. And that's one of your strengths that you have on G2 is that all of you have brains, which is one of the reasons why you're maybe the best team in the world. So
yeah, but actually, that's the thing. I'll pick up on your point, Monty, because here's the thing. It's not that they're obviously, like, that's hyperbole. You're obviously not all just brain-dead players. But I would say it's like this. What makes AD carry the weirdest role in League of Legends, in my opinion, is that, as Jankos is saying, you can have incredible impact late game. Obviously, you can carry the whole team fight. But what's bizarre is, even though you can carry the team fight, so we use the terminology, you carried it, you need your team to activate you before you can do that. So if your team doesn't peel for you, if your team has obviously no damage threats elsewhere, and they don't have to in any way respect that, then you can't do it. So what's weird is you are the guy who will be the big decision maker who wins the whole game, but only if the other people do what's necessary to get you. They have to almost build the scaffolding up before you can then be the person who has the platform from which to succeed. So it is a weird role in that regard. Whereas if you're like the mid laner, you can just carry from minute 1 of the game and then shit on everyone in the team fight with burst.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point, right? Assuming that you don't win 2v2 lane, because, I mean, mid lane has to also win his lane to actually have a team. And if bot lane wins lane, it's 2 people winning lane, not just 1, because we are talking only about AD carry. But if bot lane is playing from ahead, that's 2 people playing from ahead. That makes the map pretty much unplayable for an enemy team. And if your bot lane is snowballing hard, or, whatever bot lane is snowballing hard, it's very, very hard to, like, come back from that. And even how we played against Fnatic in Spring Split Finals, we are playing Lulu Kog'Maw. And sure, Kog'Maw did need us to set up the fights, and he did need us to peel for him, but it was more of Lulu just buffing Kog'Maw running in 1v5, and if they turn on him, they will die, so they had to run. So it wasn't like really necessarily us like setting him up that much, it was just the champ being broken. So, I mean, I agree that AD carry is probably like it's a weird role. I mean, a lot of people feel like AD carry is weak. I just disagree. I really think AD carry is in a good spot. I think that buffing AD carry furthermore will result in pro games being only about AD carry, which was already the case back in 2017 when we had the Ardent meta, where jungle would play Ivern with Ardent and all the supports were about Ardents. And right now we have it like a little bit of the Ardent meta. We do see a lot of Karma, Lulu bot lane with Aphelios. Of course, Yumi is there. Right, Yumi wasn't there before, so we do have a lot of these enchanters, so to say, being played bot lane, and we forget about like those all those like tanks that were played last year. So already right now, I feel like bot lane is like all about carrying, all about going to like 2-3 items, depends on the champion, right? Ezreal with like Trinity Force, Muramana, and Yumi cannot really lose the game unless you just don't know how to play the game. So, but if it was given to us, for example, right? I don't think there's like a lot of ways of losing the game with that kind of power spike. So sure, in solo queue it looks different because people are just not using AD carries to their limits, and they don't know how to win lane, and they don't know what to do if the lane is lost, and they don't know they can swap. And if they swap, maybe the top lane will say, "What the fuck are you doing on my lane? Get out of here! Don't take my farm." So that all looks different in solo queue. But the thing is, if we buff it for solo queue, it could get out of control in competitive. So I don't really know what will the right approach be towards bot lane role, but we always have to remember that it's bot lane role, not just AD carry role.
So moving away from AD carry, as fascinating as that is, you're a jungler, so I would rather talk to you about jungling. And especially because one of the themes of this show so far has been, well, look at all these jungle changes that have changed. Probably it's the biggest change in the game between spring and summer, and that directly is going to affect you in this scenario. Is this something you're happy about? How is this going to affect G2's play style heading in, where you might have to farm up a little bit more? You are the carry now, right?
It's actually weird. I don't know. I mean, in scrims, a lot of farming junglers are being played. Of course, we saw Graves in Korea already being played, and in China before. But even in the mid-season cup, there's a lot of junglers that are farming. And of course, there's still a lot of Lee Sin, which is, probably like champion you can always pick and you can always be useful if you play it well. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of farming junglers being played. Of course, Strand is still there as well. There's Kane, there's Graves. People play Kindred, people still play Karthus. So I'm pretty excited to see what will we end up on, because I feel like you still can play snowball style, but people tend to forget about it. And if everyone right now will focus only on scaling junglers, and if every game you will have a Kane in your team, for example, that doesn't do anything early game, and let's say enemy team can capitalize on that and pick something like, I don't know, Rek'Sai, Zoe, whatever, mid lane jungle, and just kind of push and roam and dive sides all the time, then I think, the game can snowball out of control. And of course, the XP changes in jungle made jungle champions more useful, as of by farming, you actually do get ahead now instead of, only ganking. So that's why, for example, I think Pantheon is not as strong as he used to be in Spring Split. At least in Europe, Fnatic and we would really play well with Pantheon. Right now, it's just not as good. But you still can play the snowball style. It's just if you want to risk it, right? Because, I mean, it is probably safer to just farm for late game.
Well, how does that affect you personally, though? I mean, listen, I would say last year in the two different metas, you showed that you were a complete jungler. You're one of the few players who isn't just one or the other. But you did spend all those years of your career as the First Blood King. You were a ganking jungler. That was your style. So will you enjoy this meta? Like, can you find a way to make it a fun challenge to play if you have to be a farming jungler?
I mean, it is challenging in a way where you can still play a farming jungler and you can play for like aggressive kind of. So you can always time enemy camps and you can always like talk to your mid laner about invading them, and same goes for top and bot. So it's not only about like staying in your jungle and only farming your camps. You can be really creative about your jungle pathing with different champions, where you can deny enemy jungle camps and you can actually play around that. And also about farming your camps. But yeah, I mean, that's why I also mentioned the different approach, which is the more aggressive approach that you can still play with, aggressive champions being played on the mid lane and in the jungle. But for me, I don't really mind farming for late game. I mean, it's pretty fun. It's just different, right? It's a change. The whole split, I was playing mainly aggressive junglers where I had to like do stuff early game. And right now, we as G2 also rely on me to do stuff in the early game, but playing a different style, well, I'm like sitting back and farming, and I have to like kind of trust my teammates not to die, and I have to lead a game in a different way where I am a ward bot and I'm there where I have to be there, but I'm not really fighting. I'm just there to cover people, because if we do fight and we overforce, we will die because we're playing bad champions to overforce. So it is a different style. It's pretty fun so far because it's just new. So of course, you have to like kind of get used to it. You have to learn it, and it's not like the aggressive style cannot be played. So I'm having a lot of fun in scrims. I do enjoy scrims a lot. There was a period of time when I really hated solo queue, like 2 or 1 week ago. I was so exhausted. I was like mentally out of it, because in off season I was streaming, so I didn't have a break. And at some point I was just like, I couldn't believe, I wanted to like just, I really hated my life for like 1 week of solo queue. But now I don't care anymore. I had like a exhausting week, I guess, where I would like really care about like my LP and what is going on in solo queue. But I did enjoy scrims anyway, and right now I actually do enjoy solo queue again, because, well, I guess my mindset is better again, because I just don't care anymore. And probably the best mindset is if you don't care about solo queue, because otherwise it will drive you crazy. Yeah, so I just don't care. I'm playing for fun. I'm playing to improve, and it's whatever, I'm enjoying League again, and I'm happy I'm enjoying League, because otherwise, what's the point?
Sure.
Well, in this,
that's how you know, Monty, that he plays for the super team that has like all the best players at every position, because they just go, oh, the meta's changed, cool, we'll just.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, well,
if I'm in a team that's like if I had like Uzi as my AD carry, we switched to like solo lanes, I'd just throw my PC out the window. It's like, what's the fucking point? We'd just be wrecked.
Yeah, I think that this, like, you guys, especially the way you're talking about how scrims are going right now, it seems like in a wide open meta, which most people are saying that this is a hugely open meta. Like it's the same. You basically almost everything from last split is viable, but also all this new stuff is now viable as well. And in that world, when G2 makes, you guys are also smart at the game and you make such good decisions on the fly. You look at the way you guys were flexing champion picks last split, and then you think about how you could actually flex and open up this massive new pool of heroes potentially coming into this new season. This seems like it's great for G2. Isn't this what you want? Like, you guys have never been defined by a style. So the more open the space is, I would think the better it is for G2.
I mean, I think you can say that. For me personally, we don't really think about what meta suits us the best. We just play the best League of Legends we can play. And yeah, we do like to flex champions, and we have, very talented solo laners, and we also have very talented bot lane. So we can kind of play every style, and
yes,
what we look for is the best way of playing the game. And in every style, there's probably a way of playing the game which is, just better than the other ways. So it's very early to say right now what will the meta be on stage, because people play a bit different, that maybe suddenly all the farming junglers are actually useless, because on stage there's a lot of fighting, especially that everything will happen online still, so people maybe are less stressed and they will just fight more. I'm personally quite curious to see, but I do agree with every statement about solo queue. It is pretty versatile, and I enjoy it quite a lot, because I feel like every role can carry right now. Even though it is still biased towards junglers, towards mid laners in solo queue, because of course we can be everywhere. We can roam the whole map. Then if top lane is ahead, he can be 2-3 levels ahead. Already last split because of the XP changes, and he can snowball the whole game alone if he's playing a carry, or he can like snowball with a tank by tipping to bot lane. Bot lane of course got buffed again. The AD carries have more HP. On top of just bot lane being very impactful if they're playing from ahead, and if not, that they can still like play to win a game. Even if the jungle is not there, they can just not die and not get punished. So the game is in a good state. I enjoy it. I think that the game is like in a very healthy state right now.
What about let's ask about some other LEC teams then while we still got some time. So what about thoughts on Fnatic? Like, everyone thought they were going to win last split, mate. But now, because of that final, now everyone's just bailed on them. So what do you think of where Fnatic's at?
Well, I do like winning against Fnatic, because I like the salty fans. Like, Fnatic has like the best salty fans.
They do.
And every time I play Fnatic, and I post about it, like, oh, we are playing Fnatic, we are going to win. Every time I see under my post, like, no, you will lose, you suck, Fnatic's the best. So every time I read that, I get really excited to play against them because every time we win, it just tastes so much better, like so much sweeter. But I mean, they are a good team, right? I cannot deny that they are for sure the second best team in Europe. And they were hyped up last split because I guess they did head into playoffs as top 2, and then we lost our game to MAD Lions. They kind of stomped over both MAD Lions and Origin, which made them the favors in the final because, you know, we kind of sucked, I guess, against MAD Lions. And then we picked up the ball better and we read the meta better than they did. And of course, drafts against Fnatic were like really straightforward since they played 2-3 champs each. So it was really easy to draft. And yeah, I mean, they are still really talented, really skilled, you know, every single one of the players is really good. So it's not easy. And I'm not going to say that, you know, it's going to be easy in Summer Split because it won't be, but we'll probably still win anyway. I mean, I don't have doubt that my teammates are just the best, and I don't have doubt that I can be the best or I am the best. So it's just pretty chill, honestly. Like, yeah, it's pretty chill.
I think you guys should be extremely happy right now because, yeah, you suffered that defeat at the hands of MAD Lions, but it really wasn't close the rest of your run through the playoffs. And you guys look like you needed that little boost of motivation to return you to your form. Now you're making the switch of caps and perks back. Like, surely, you know, you guys going hard this season should put you in contention for a potential world's title. That's got to be what you're gunning for right now, right?
I mean, definitely in the long run, right? We are aiming small though, or maybe not small, but like slow. And we want to focus on the split first. Of course, last year at Worlds, we really got burned out, and you could feel in scrims that we were like kind of more emotional and more like mad at each other than we used to throughout the splits. So the fact that there was no MSI and we could take it slow is definitely going to help, but we still have to like focus on Summer Split, and you know, we want to win it, we want to get to Worlds. Summer Split rules are a bit different because I actually don't know what is it exactly, but I know that 4 teams are going to Worlds.
Yes.
So I think not qualifying to Worlds as G2 right now would be impossible. Like literally there's like no possible way of us not going to Worlds, I think. If there's 4 teams going, I think I'm confident enough to say that we are at least top 4 in Europe, hopefully by the end of the split.
Something would have to go very wrong, yes.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, like in the long run, sure, we can aim to win Worlds, but already last year we probably had even better year than this year because we were even more dominant last year. Like by the end of Spring Split, you could say we are like by far the best team in Europe, and then we even won MSI, and then we are like decently dominant in summer until Fnatic games, which we both won 3-2. But still, people like hyped us up a lot, and heading into finals with FPX, everyone's like, G2 will win. And then what happened, right? They were like the better team. But already back then, scrims against FPX were like really bad. Like we were losing a lot of scrim games against them. And normally we are like up true to our results, you know? If we win in scrims, we win on stage. If we don't, we don't. Because we play very similar way. And well, hopefully Worlds will take place. I think Riot will do everything possible for them to take place. We already had the mid-season cup in Asia, so I'm really excited. I hope that I will get to go to Worlds this year, even if it's online somehow, somewhere. And yeah, it's the redemption year for G2.
How do you think self-made will adapt to if it becomes a farming meta?
I mean, I think that I did meet him in solo queue a couple of times. We did also Scream Fnatic. I think he, like, for sure on Graves, he's pretty good, you know? He plays a good Graves. I don't know what else can he play. Probably like everything, like every other jungler, right? It's not like a lot of... It's not like the farming meta champions are hard to play. I'd say that aggressive style of pressuring early game and being good at early game is harder than AFK farming, because all you do when you're farming is you have to time camps and you have to time enemy camps.
Sure.
And you have to be where you have to be. So it's more of it's like playing a tank, but instead of playing a tank, you're playing as farming jungler, right? Tanks are kind of about just controlling the game slowly as well and just being where you have to be. And then when you get 6, normally you get like the extra CC where you can gank. With farming junglers, you don't really get the extra CC, you just get one item, then you are strong enough to gank. So I think it's not a very difficult style, and I think Selfmade's like played the game long enough to probably adapt to it well. I don't know if he's going to be like really good at it, because I felt like Fnatic relied on him to like get those early games going.
Of course.
And whenever he wouldn't like pop off on Lee Sin or whatever he was playing, Fnatic wouldn't look as dominant. So I don't know how favorable for Fnatic it is to put him on a different champion than early game champion, but it's also a test for them, and it also can make them stronger as a team. So I mean, we as in Fnatic have like very similar playstyles, right? So we will see who will adapt better and who will just be stronger. I think we meet each other already in like week 3 or something, so not long, I guess 2-3 weeks. Yeah, I mean, this week we played 3 games. I'm also excited for that. I really like the fact that we have super weeks now. I mean, this is something we didn't mention. I just want to get it out. I really like the fact that we have super weeks because no Rift Rivals. I love it. That was just like...
If I were you, and knowing G2's style, and like I said, your flexibility, I too would love super weeks because you guys have the depth and the on-the-fly decision-making to do very well with limited prep against your opponents. I think this is the G2 dream, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why, of course, but also the fact that we will have extra time off during the split. Never happened, right? Where you can actually take time off. I mean, okay, so if you wouldn't qualify to Rift Rivals, you would have time off. But right now, everyone has time off for like 2 weeks almost, like between week 5 and 6 or 4 and 5, whatever, where you can maybe go for a summer vacation if you want to, or maybe you can just go back to your family. Maybe you can just chill a bit. I think it's just having a break in summertime is just something I never experienced. So I'm really excited for it. And playing more games a week is better because I remember times where we had super weeks when I started playing League. So it's very nostalgic. In 2014, when I qualified as KMT, we played under Rocket. We had super weeks back then. I think back then we even played maybe up to 4 teams a week. I'm not sure, was it 3 or 4? But it was really exciting for me. And yeah, I mean, playing more games is more fun, you know? So even though we have 3 opponents and probably it sucks for our coaching staff having to prepare more drafts or more, well,
it does suck a lot.
That many drafts
it does.
anyway,
As somebody who
yeah.
coached through super weeks, it sucks a lot. It is the worst. I hate that.
But for players, it's really fun. So
it isn't. You think that now until you hit that one trap game where somebody has like created that custom strat just to beat you, and you haven't prepped for them at all because you've been prepping for the good teams, and then you lose to somebody shitty. That's when you're going to start, feeling bad about it.
That could be the case, but mindset of a player that played for 7-6 years already. I don't like if we, okay, so our goal is to go 18-0 until we lose. And then when we lose, it doesn't matter how many games we lose as long as we get to playoffs, because if we are in playoffs, we win the split, right? Or like we aim to win the split. And all you need to win the split is be in playoffs. So, I mean, for sure we want to win every game, but if we like drop one game, it will really hurt the day we drop the game and then maybe the day after. But, starting Monday when we play scrims again, it's not going to matter, you will still get into the mood of like keep playing and keep grinding and just being the best. And he cheesed you and you will learn from it and you will be better. And in hindsight, you will actually grow. So
it is hard to cheese you guys, to be fair. You as a team are one of the more difficult teams to cheese. So I can understand your perspective on it.
I think it's also because people tend to be more scared about cheesing us because they think we play everything and we will just see through them. And also, for example, I would just give example, team like MAD Lions is a very coached team. I don't think they would like really cheese like in like BO5 at least, like maybe a level 1, but not like a really cheese game because they play really by the book. And teams like Origin same, and teams like Fnatic, I would expect like Fnatic maybe to figure something out, but yeah, I mean they also are like a lot of the time straightforward how they play the game. So yeah, I mean maybe it's harder, maybe teams are just not trying hard enough to cheese, because we played Lulu Kog'Maw and somehow like no one thought about it and so on. We won playoffs, so who knows? I mean, there's for sure something that is really OP that people don't know about.
All right, to wrap it up, because I know you got to go, who are the 4 teams from LEC that are going to be going to Worlds should it happen?
I think G2, Fnatic, MAD Lions, and then I don't really know about Rogue or Origin, but one of these. I'd say Origin for now, but Rogue could step up and qualify. Of course, I wish both of them the best, but I think like the 3 clear favorites would be probably us, MAD Lions and Fnatic, and then probably Origin, like 75%.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, Jankos. Again, remember, Summoning Insight now on Mondays. The reason we were doing it on Tuesdays was because of Monday Night League. That no longer exists, so we'll be doing it Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. European time. Insight on Esports on Twitch, Insight on Esports on YouTube. Go to those. Follow this channel if you are watching it now on YouTube or Twitch. In the YouTube, there'll be links below to everything. So please just be aware that this has moved. We will see you next Monday after the first set of games in LCS and LEC. Thank you for joining us. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.